Stephanie. Good morning. Thank you all for being here this morning, panelists, moderators, and folks attending from across the state. I'm Mindy Nobles with the Coordinating Board. I'm Assistant Director for Career and Technical Education in the Coordinating Board's Workforce Education Division. I'll begin our meeting by introducing Dr. Tina Jackson, um, who will give the welcome. And I'll follow Dr. Jackson with some housekeeping notes and an introduction of the Perkins CTE staff. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Tina Jackson. Dr. Jackson joined the coordinating board in December 2020 as Assistant Commissioner for the newly created Workforce Education Division. Dr. Jackson most recently served as District Director of Developmental Education at Collin College. In this role, she worked district-wide on issues related to developmental education, completion, and guided pathways to careers. Last year, Dr. Jackson's developmental education program received, this was in 2019, a 2019 Promising Program Award. Awarded by the National Association of Developmental Education. In July 2018, Dr. Jackson was only one of 20 individuals across the United States selected for the American Association of Blacks in Higher Education Leadership and Mentoring Institute. Dr. Jackson served as statewide lead administrator for community college programs at UT Austin's Charles A. Dana Center for 5 years. There, Dr. Jackson helped to redesign developmental math throughout all 50 community colleges in the state of Texas. During her years with the University of Texas, Dr. Jackson was named a Jackson Scholar by the University Council for Educational Administration. She was awarded a Community College Leadership Fellowship from UT Austin. And she received an award from the Association for the Study of Higher Education to continue her research on STEM, workforce development in community college, focusing on students of color. Dr. Jackson has also served as Associate Dean of Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, STEM, at Dallas County Community College District. Dr. Jackson is currently Vice President of Programs on the State Board for the Texas Association of Black Personnel in Higher Education. In that capacity, she oversees legislative issues impacting higher education. Dr. Jackson holds a bachelor's degree in science, a master's degree in education from the University of Minnesota, and a PhD in educational administration from the University of Texas in Austin. And Dr. Jackson, I will give you the floor.
Thank you so much, Mindy. It is just an honor to work with you. And I just can't say enough positive things about Mindy and her team, her Perkins team, that has done just a great job of doing this work, especially through the COVID season that we've been in over the past almost year now. So thank you so much, Mindy. I appreciate you, Stephanie, Dwayne, and I know that Sherry, I think Sherry's still on, and Sherry and the rest of the team that have done just great work throughout this past year. And I just want to say hello and welcome to all of my colleagues who are with me today. Many of you I know personally, we've worked together in the field. And so I just say thank you for all the great work you're doing. I wanted to just spend maybe about 5 minutes talking to you all about what's happening at the coordinating board. And then also just to share our thanks for you joining us and our thanks for the work that you're doing consistently every day through this pandemic. And then also through the recent storms that we had. Hopefully all of you all are doing well, and then your neighbors and family are also doing well. So we wish you well wishes in that regards. So today I wanted to just spend a moment to set the tone as we begin to talk about this work that is so important now, especially because of the pandemic, and how we are refining what we're doing at the coordinating board. I know that all of you all are familiar with the 60 by 30 plan that came out several years ago. And now as we look towards 2030, we're really looking at how can we make this plan work better. And so what we've done, and actually what the commissioner has done, is come up with a refinement plan. And so here you see the areas that we felt like there was a need to change some of the things that we had strategically talked about when we began this journey a while back. Now, things have changed definitely because of the pandemic. And so one of the things that we know has changed is the need of people that we need to get back upskilled and reskilled throughout the community. And so one of the things that we've changed is we've broadened the scope. Before, as you all know, we were targeting 25 through 34-year-olds, and now we're looking at individuals from the ages of 35 to 64 as well. And so it's important. We all know that many people have lost their jobs or they're underemployed because they've had to take on additional work. And so we are really looking at how can we build that workforce? How can we upskill those families so that they can get into those high credentialed, stackable credentialed fields? And so that's one area that the commissioner felt was important for us to focus in on. Another area that we're leveraging is really looking at the innovation related to what's happened because of the pandemic. And so how we're doing that is through research and looking at how we can connect what we're learning about some of the trends that are coming out of the pandemic. So it's important to understand that as we move forward, we know that there are things that we're going to have to plan for based off of what we've experienced this past year. And so we are doing just that. And then we're also looking at the importance of equity. What does that mean? What that means is really looking at our communities of color, our Hispanic populations, our African American populations, and finding out how we can help to assist them. We know that many of them are suffering. We know that many of them are unemployed or underemployed, and it's really showing its face through the pandemic. And so that is an area of focus that has been a priority now to the commissioner, as well as to all of us at the coordinating board. And then last but definitely not least, high value credentials aligned to workforce needs. And I'll also share with that regionally, it's important to do that as well. We know that we're in the great state of Texas with lots of different needs across the state. And so how can we make sure, colleagues, that we are really making sure our students we're serving receive the highest credentials possible, that they could potentially not only go into their workforce pathway, but then if they decide to come back to us at the 4-year level, they're able to use what they got at the 2-year level to create more of a platform to be more marketable in the field. I'm excited about this work, excited to work with all of you all, passionate about the work, and most importantly, ready to hear more about what you all are doing in your respective institutions. Have a great start to the day, and I look forward to coming back to you tomorrow and sharing some of my thoughts about how we're going to move forward. Thanks so much.
Okay, and thank you very much, Dr. Jackson. Let me get back to my notes here. Okay, let me do a little housekeeping right quick. This meeting is being recorded, and as you've already observed, live captioning is on. Attendees should plan to remain muted, except for moderators and panelists when they're speaking. Ask your questions, please, in the Q&A section or box, and we'll address them during discussion following each presentation. And if I'm leaving out anything necessary for housekeeping, I invite Stephanie to jump in and add it, please. That said, I'll introduce my colleagues in Perkins and CTE. Let me begin with Dwayne Hiller, manager. Everybody's titles have been program director for a long time. We are now manager twos. I'm going to call everybody manager for short. Dwayne is a longtime manager in AQW and now workforce education. Dwayne will serve as our timekeeper today. We've made Dwayne the bad cop because he's such an intrinsically nice guy. Dwayne will jump in about 5 minutes prior to the end of discussion, and just note that you have 5 minutes. Next, I'll introduce Sherry Rannis. Dr. Rannis joined the coordinating board in 2018. She serves as manager too as well, overseeing Perkins grants and importantly, the Texas Reskilling grant program that is working to get the workforce back into good shape in this state following the impact on the economy of the pandemic. Dr. Rannis will serve as our Q&A moderator today. So she will put forth any questions you post in the Q&A box to the panelists as discussion takes place. Finally, I will introduce Stephanie Perkins, whom you've already heard from today. Stephanie is all things Perkins in workforce education. She advises grants. She also does the programmatic fiscal oversight for Perkins. And most of you have spoken with her or emailed with her at some point in that capacity. I want to give a big shout out to Stephanie for putting this leadership presentation event together this year via Zoom. She has put in some long hours to organize and make sure everybody is, on page about how this will work, and to get presentations ready to keep everybody informed. So a big thank you to Stephanie for that. And with that, I will introduce the first panelist, the first panel. Our 3 panels today all center on curricular innovation. And you see panel 1 here. I will introduce the moderator, Dr. Leslie Keeling Olson of Temple College. And she is also the current TACD president this year. And Dr. Keeling Olson will introduce in turn panelists for this first panel. Leslie?
Good morning and welcome everybody. Panel 1, as Mindy alluded to, is promoting curricular innovation, and we will be starting with the Dallas College Blending Pathways Year 2. I'd first like to introduce Tricia Thomas Anderson. With over 20 years of higher education experience, Tricia Thomas Anderson has valued involvement in opportunities for growth and development among community colleges in student services, continuing education, and resource development beyond traditional expectations of 2-year institutions. As a result, for the past 5 years, Tricia has led the institution in reviewing the value and enhancement of accelerated pathways that engage and train faculty in supporting 21st century post-secondary initiative. As the Dean of Resource Development for Eastfield College and now Senior Director of Sponsored Programs for the new Dallas College, Tricia has managed and overseen several projects focused on experiential learning and faculty and staff training in the support of students entering college with aligned competencies. Tricia also worked with the SACS COC through the Connecting Credentials project, resulting in the development of enhanced policies and procedures at the institution to meet accrediting standards for awarding credit for experiential learning. So before she starts today, here's a couple of statements to set the groundwork for her presentation. As with the SACS COC project, the current Blended Pathways project is a scale up and enhancement of faculty development as evaluators and institutional expansion of accelerated pathways designed to support the 60 by 30 Texas goals. As a result, Dallas College, in partnership with South Texas College, is increasing the number of faculty engaged in the development of competency-based education pathways and CTE programs in Texas and beyond. Tricia, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Leslie, for that introduction, and hello to everyone. Thank you to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board for your support of Dallas College and this initiative for a number of years. And I'm just glad to be here, in a different environment, but continue to be able to share, the initiatives that we've been working on and continuing the process of increasing accelerated pathways and faculty evaluation training. And I moonlight as a history professor, so I believe that it's very difficult to really kind of know where you are, how you came to where you are and where you're going without a little bit of history. So for those who are unfamiliar with the Blended Pathways project, I'm going to start off on the next slide with just a little bit of history about how the Blended Pathways project came about and how we came to where we are today as we move forward. I have to mention that Diane Tompkins, who is probably more than likely joining us today as one of the participants in the field, has actually served with this project along with me. She's been my partner in good on this project, and I wasn't sure if we would be able to have multiple presenters today, and so I'm presenting on both of our behalves of Dallas College. But the 2015-2016 year, we actually initiated an application and were awarded through the coordinating board for our first Perkins State Leadership grant focused on prior learning assessment. And it was called the PLA Portal Project. And at the time, both Eastfield and Dallas College as a whole, were really starting to get more involved in the PLA, what that looked like, and expanding prior learning assessment strategies. And for us, it was a learning opportunity. And we thought this would be an ideal time to not only learn more, at our own institution, campus, as well as district-wide, but we know that other institutions likely were in the same position, wanting to learn more about how to develop different strategies and methods for PLA and help students to move forward quicker in an accelerated pathway. So that project was primarily focused on professional development of faculty, administrators, as well as staff in CTE, student services, to get grasp a better understanding of prior learning assessment. And so we would have considered ourselves an emerging institution at the time, having some of the basic PLA assessments, AP, as an option, credit by exam, by request, but wanting to grow, beyond that and see, how can we develop, more for our students. So in addition to providing several face-to-face trainings at the time throughout the state of Texas, we captured those trainings by video, as well as resources that were shared with us by one of our partners, the American Council on Education, and in collaboration on the training dissemination with the North Texas Community College Consortium, and created a platform called the PLA Portal. And that platform is still in existence and now is actually being transitioned on a SharePoint site that would be publicly available with the help of our Dallas College Marketing and Digital Experiences team. And so, one of the things that I've shared in a previous training, that some find is a little bit humorous, but it is true. I'm a migrant from Louisiana and I've been in Texas for over 25 years. But that particular project, as Diane and I, continue to travel from campus, the campus from institution, to institution, we saw parts of Texas all over. I saw many parts of Texas that I'd never seen before. But it was a wonderful experience. We grasped a lot of knowledge out of it. We, made connections with several institutions, made a lot of new friends, and that helped us to even, move forward in where did we want to go in the next steps, in this process. And so in 2017, 2018, with the knowledge that we gained, now wanting to move more into a developing institution, where we could actually see, our faculty engaged in the development of accelerated pathways beyond, some of the common assessments, and make make it known, that individuals who previously, had gained industry certifications, could receive credit for those certifications at the institution. And so, we developed the Blended Pathways project as a scale up from the PLA Portal project, with Blended Pathways really identifying or describing the accelerated pathways of industry certifications, crosswalking to credit programs of study in CTE. And so again, with the focus of much more on the development of our faculty and training of our faculty, that project specifically was geared toward training faculty as evaluators of industry certifications and identifying how those competencies from those certifications would actually align with the CTE programs of study. Again, in partnership with American Council on Education, these faculty members, in addition to participating in face-to-face conferences or institutes, they also worked with subject matter experts from ACE, as well as individuals from other institutions who have been known to have best practice in the evaluation of experiential learning and credentials through a technical assistance platform. And so after their training, they would work directly with the subject matter experts, to provide hands-on support, to connect through discussion boards and group conference calls throughout the process. So they would have that continued support, as they continue to look at, those different credentials, to make sure, that they had the support, and some affirmation that they were on the right track in how they were crosswalking those credentials. And as a result of that project, next slide, please. These are some of the third-party industry certifications, that were evaluated for the CTE programs. And so we focused on heating and air conditioning, ventilation, automotive and auto body, repair, and BOSS or computer information technology. And we asked our faculty to just, give us at least one crosswalk, a Blended Pathways crosswalk. But what you see on the right side of the chart is they went far beyond, just one crosswalk in regards to the industry certifications that they identified. And so after the first crosswalk, as they, worked with the subject matter experts, and they really felt like they had a grasp, on exactly, what that process would look like and the strategies and steps that they need to take to develop these blended pathways, it was very easy for them to move on to, another industry certification. And so they were inspired, to identify more and more industry certifications that might align with their programs of study. Next slide, please. So in that first Blended Pathways project that started in 2017, 2018, as we started to come to an end of that project, and of course, that project was a one-year project, we were also selected by SAC-COC to participate in their Connecting Credentials project funded through the Lumina Foundation. And with that project, we decided, and it was a shorter project. We decided, well, let's scale up what we're doing, offer it beyond our Dallas College institutions and see if we can help other institutions replicate, what faculty have been able to do through the Blended Pathways project. And the other factor that we really wanted to focus on, especially since this was a SAC-COC grant and we were working closely with the accrediting agency, was to really look at what policies and procedures or written policy and procedure might look like, and that would be acceptable, by accrediting agencies at our institution. So we focused on replicating these previous programs of study or blended pathways that you saw on the previous slide, creating a new one in criminal justice at multiple Dallas College campuses, and then creating policies and procedures that would align with the work that the faculty had completed in that process. And two things came out of it that were really great. Of course, an additional program of study in criminal justice, blended pathways developed out of that criminal justice TCO certification. In alignment with the projects, the programs of study that were being offered at Dallas College, as well as the replication of some of the previous blended pathways. But in order to develop the policies and procedures, we engaged several leaders from the academic areas, the student services areas, and our president's cabinet on the policies and procedures, what they would look like. Did they capture, all of the justification and steps in the process that the faculty were engaged in developing these blended pathways? And so that was a very, positive aspect of this project as well, because it engaged the leadership, in that process beyond just the work that was being done at the academic level. Next slide, please. And so now we are at our current project, the Blended Pathways 2 project through the coordinating board. And this project started, of course, last year, and we're into our second year. And it was designed to not only replicate what we've done in the SAC-COC project as far as bringing in other institutions who, maybe they're not ready to develop their own, but with some help and, a sample, they can replicate, a credit for prior learning pathway using the industry certifications and crosswalking those competencies. But to go a little bit further, for Dallas College and other institutions, who are really interested in also creating accelerated pathways for students in competency-based education. And so our current project is focused on the replication of credit for prior learning, blended pathways, as well as the development of competency-based education pathways, and using those policies and procedures as a guide, updating those to include CBE, and sharing it with other institutions. And in this project, our own South Texas College is one of our partners and the leader, one of the leaders in Texas in regards to the development of CBE pathways. And so we've been working very closely with South Texas College in the dissemination of training and professional development for participants in this project, as well as the connection with subject matter experts in the program areas for those who are interested in developing CBE pathways through our technical assistant component. Next slide, please. So this time last year, when we did our annual Perkins State Leadership presentation on this project, we had just completed the virtual pre-institute for the Credit for Prior Learning Faculty Evaluator Institute. And this was a replication of the type of faculty evaluator training that we had implemented, in the first project. And it always involved, a pre-institute that included those faculty who had committed to that they wanted to be a part of the technical assistance component and work with the subject matter experts throughout the development of a blended pathway, a CPL blended pathway. And so this just kind of gives you an overview of some of the things that were included in that institute, so that more time could be spent with the subject matter experts and grasping and understanding of credit for prior learning, and some time on what the technical assistance platform might look like, and giving them access to that platform. And samples of summaries of crosswalk could be spent in the pre-institute. And so after our coordinating board meeting, which was February 6th of last year, we actually had the face-to-face CPL Institute and worked with those faculty. Next slide. So during that institute, we had 32 faculty, administrators, and staff participate in the institute from 9 different institutions in Texas. 11 of those attendees from 7 institutions committed to participating in the post-institute technical assistance component to work on developing credit for prior learning blended pathways. We identified those subject matter experts for those program areas that they were interested in. And then of course, the SharePoint site is a customized site, based on, the technical assistance for each aspect, whether it's CPL or CBE, and basically provides a timeline of different touch points, when they will meet as a group and how they will connect. Next slide, please. And this is just a sample snapshot of what the SharePoint site looks like. And when we first started the technical assistance component in that first blended pathways project, the American Council on Education actually built and developed this site for us and managed the site. And so we've been able to keep a platform in SharePoint to continue this. And, our key subject matter expert and coordinator of the technical assistance training and some of the face-to-face and now virtual institutes is the developer and continued manager of the SharePoint site. And then to the right in the little box, it just kind of shows you some of the things that faculty are engaged in and action steps that take place. There's a foundation of mapping. There's several resources and crosswalks and examples that faculty have access to. And then again, they meet with their subject matter experts through this site and on conference calls and discuss, the action planning and the progress through the development. Next slide, please. And then it hit, of course, it's spring break, the second week of March. We, definitely were going into a different mode. We learned prior to that several of our face-to-face events would no longer be able to be held. And then after spring break, we came back in 100% remote environment. Next slide, please. And so, as we came back, in a virtual environment, this graphic just kind of shows some of the things that, I know that many of you experienced as well. We went to 100% online classes, with the exception of some hybrid courses that required hands-on lab work. From a working environment, we were 100% remote work, and as well as responding to the needs of students in this transition to 100% virtual environment. Council events occurred, but in addition to that, as many of you know, Dallas County Community College District was transitioning to Dallas College into a one college model. And, with that transition, there's been several new structures developed. If some of you were on, the call before, we actually got started, we were talking about location and centralization. And so all of these things, were taking place, as we continue to think about how we can continue to move this project forward. Next slide, please. So our first CBE Institute, which although we focused on year 2 to be primarily concentrated on CBE, because CBE is a much more complex process than what we had previously been working with faculty on in regards to replicating CPL, we wanted to start early. And so we had planned to have our first CBE Institute in late spring, April, May. But as the pandemic, came upon us and we really had to shift and think about, what options do we have? We had not previously done our institutes virtually. We were primarily, a face-to-face workshop, liking to engage with, participants. And so having to determine which platform would be the best platform to use, we decided to go ahead and move forward with the CBE Institute in a virtual format using WebEx. And so our first CBE Institute included 11 administrators and faculty who, as a result of that institute, decided to also participate in the technical assistance. I think that I'm going ahead too quick. So our technical assistance for the CPL was right in the middle of the pandemic after the first institute, as we also were thinking about how are we going to implement the CBE Institute. And so this slide just shows how the technical assistance continued, which was already in a virtual format, and those who participated. These are the 3 institutes who participated in the technical assistance aspect of the CPL replication and some of the programs that were involved. Next slide, please. And I won't go through, all of these, but these are just snapshots of some of the blended pathways that resulted from the technical assistance replication. Collin College, created one in HVAC. Next slide, please. As well as one in automotive technology. And so you can just see the college credits that they were able to award students who were engaged in the program of study based on their evaluation and crosswalk of the industry certifications and the previous replications or platforms and blended pathways that have been created. Next slide, please. In addition to Collin College's replication of the blended pathways in HVAC and automotive technology, Dallas College created a new credit for prior learning pathway in accounting. And so this is just a snapshot of some of the credits that could be awarded to students and from the different third-party certifications credentials that the faculty involved in this process had identified. Next slide, please. So another part of this project, as with all Perkins State Leadership projects, is to disseminate, the results of the project and disseminate these products across the state of Texas. And we were able to participate in the Fast Track to Success conference, which for the first time was also virtual in the summer. And we actually participated and facilitated 2 sessions, a pre-conference session, investing in faculty for the future, and a breakout session on blended pathways, outcomes for faculty training and mentoring and developing accelerated pathways. And we're also continuing to look at calls for proposals, such as TACD. We're looking forward to a call for proposal to come out for NISOD and perhaps the Fast Track to Success conference as well to continue to disseminate the project outcomes. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, we had the CBE Institutes to begin in the summer virtually with the first CBE Institute for faculty and administrators focused on the theory and frameworks of CBE. And so rather than the one-day workshop that we normally would have had face-to-face, we now have 2 half-day virtual workshops. And so day 1, June 26th, and day 2, July 10th, kicked off our CBE Institute. And then in the fall, we actually spearheaded and developed and initiated our second CBE Institute virtually, connecting the CBE process to degree. And so this one went a little bit further beyond the frameworks and engaged, participants in the process, shared samples, of what a CBE course might look like in a Blackboard environment. Again, it was a 2-day workshop or institute, the first day of November 6th, where Dr. Kevin Peak really, was able to, provide, most of the nuts and bolts of what an institution would need and faculty need to know in regards to developing a CBE pathway, as well as, sharing the different aspects of what a CBE pathway course would look like developed in the Blackboard environment or platform. And then the second day, December 4th, we had several panel panelists from different institutions who were known to have, best practice in the development of CBE at their institutions, as well as a general session by Carlos Rivers from Texas A&M Commerce, on the lessons learned throughout their process in developing CBE. Next slide. And so during that CBE Institute registration, we gathered some data in regards to the competency of those individuals who were planning to attend. And so this slide just gives you some idea of, the percentage of individuals who from their institutions believe that their institution was a novice institution with no prior CBE experience to those who were emerging institutions with some knowledge of CBE programming, and some who were actually developing institutions, having some CBE development experience. And surprisingly, we had more of the developing institutions and a really good number of emerging and novice institutions. Next slide, please. So, as I come to a close, we are preparing, not only for our next CBE Institute, the third CBE Institute on competency-based education, which will sort of, close out the CBE theory frameworks and nuts and bolts to, implementation, and integrating that process into the institution. And then we're also looking at having another credit for prior learning faculty evaluator institute in the summer, since we do have that additional time. And so more information about those institutes will be shared with the Perkins group and others that we actually use a listserv for to share upcoming events. Next slide, please. I think that's it. And of course, there's my contact information. If anyone has any questions, after, our visit today or wants more information about the Blended Pathways project. So thank you so much. And I hope that I have left enough time for Sam Jack.
Tricia, thank you for your presentation. And as continuation of our panel 1, promoting curricular innovation, Sam Jack will be presenting on their first year of Pathways to Careers. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Janes, who is the Associate Vice Chancellor of Continuing and Professional Development, CPD, at San Jacinto College. In this position, she provides oversight of the divisions of workforce development and of community engagement for the college. Prior to becoming Associate Vice Chancellor, she served as Dean of Instruction and Academic Dean at San Jacinto College North Campus. She has over 25 years of experience at the community college level and 18 years in public education. Additionally today, Jerry Parks is the project coordinator for the Pathways to Careers and Leading the Way grants. She joined San Jacinto College in 2019 with over 15 years experience in education, training, and project management. Before they start, here's a couple of things to lay the groundwork. Pathways to Careers grant. This grant is designed to increase student knowledge of educational pathways in computer science and health science careers. This will include both apprenticeship and credit pathways option. SJC will be developing pre-employment workshops to educate students and their families in career options. The workshops will include pathway opportunities, hands-on exploration, and employability skills. Dr. Janes and Jerry, I pass it to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm excited to be here with you today to talk about the Pathways to Careers grant. As Leslie said, this is the first year of a 2-year grant. We received this in the fall of 2020, and I came on in November of 2020 to become the grant coordinator. Pathways to Careers Grant is a pilot program that really aims to create better understanding of career pathways for students, their families, and the community in healthcare and computer science professions. And that includes both traditional and non-traditional pathways. So if we go ahead, thank you. So the grant has two main goals. The first one is to increase the number of students with understanding of apprenticeships as a pathway to success in computer science and healthcare professions. Where this idea comes from is what we know to be true about today's students. One of the things that we know to be true is that many students are quite overwhelmed by the number of choices that they have, the sheer volume of opportunities. And on top of that, they often have limited understanding of what each one of those career pathways is. What is it that those professionals do? On top of that, they also have very limited understanding of apprenticeships and what apprenticeship options are available to them and how they can use that to build a successful career. So we want to give them the opportunity to learn more about these career pathways before they start to invest their time and energy and money into their education. For this grant, we specifically focused on healthcare and computer science professions because those two areas have become really essential during the pandemic. And so we know that more students will be looking at those areas and that they will continue to struggle, find challenges in figuring out exactly where they want to go as they pursue their particular career pathway. Anyone who listens to me speak knows that these topics are often personal to me because I have a senior in my house. And when I talk to him and I talk to his friends, they all feel the same way, that no matter how much their high school and even middle school has tried to help them decipher their options, they still struggle. And the pressure on them to try to figure out what it is they want to do for the rest of their lives before they spend their money on education is immense. So what we are hoping to do is to create better consumers so that they have an idea of the direction they're going before they start to invest in it. So if you could go ahead and advance to the next slide. So how are we going to achieve this first goal? Well, our plan is to create a 3-week pre-employment workshop. So this grant actually was developed before the pandemic. I mean, we had developed it and written it, and we were just in the process of submitting it. And so we originally thought we would run those 3 weeks at 40 hours a week, bring the students all together. We realize now that we're going to have to start out with virtual instead of face-to-face. And so there may be some changes to that process and how that 3 weeks looks. We will be targeting students ages 16 to 24 primarily. We want to get to those high school juniors and seniors and college freshmen before they start to invest a lot of time, energy, and money to see if we can help them have a clearer vision for what it is they want to complete. The workshop will include pathway information, hands-on exploration, and employability skills. We really want to give them skills in those 3 weeks that they can use for a lifetime, especially when it comes to career exploration. We want them to know how to do that work on their own going forward because very few of us stay in one career. So we want them to have the skills that are needed to do that work throughout their career, as they may be interested in making changes in their career, going back to school, whatever that looks like. Next slide, please. So the second piece of this grant is then to take those workshops and develop a curricula that can be used statewide for pre-employment workshops in healthcare and computer science professions. And really, we're hoping that we create a framework that can go well beyond computer science and healthcare. So of course, we had to focus in on a couple of options, but we really see this as a much broader model for how we can really start to engage students early on in their learning career, in their higher education career, how we can kind of make some inroads to, like I said, not only engaging them, but also really providing support for them as they make some of these really complicated decisions. Next slide, please. So how are we going to achieve goal number 2? Well, my expertise is in project management, and so we will be hiring curriculum writers for both of these areas, both health science and healthcare and information technology. We will be working with subject matter experts, not only from our institution, but institutions throughout the state of Texas, industry experts, as well as a number of grants that we already work with at Sanjag. We're going to bring them together to help us create our objectives and outcomes for these workshops. Once we then conduct the first series of workshops, we're going to come back together, we're going to review and revise, we're going to have other institutions look at our materials and see where we need to make improvements. So our first set of workshops will be in the summer. They will be virtual only. We will take the fall to review and revise and then offer them again. Eventually, we will have both virtual and hybrid modalities, as well as hopefully to do more face-to-face work as well. We hope to bring in not only the faculty to teach these workshops, but also community leaders to come in to talk about these industries. We really want to give these students some hands-on experience. So we're hoping to be able to do some tours, whether virtually or face-to-face, possibly some job shadowing or some information interviews, something that gives these students an opportunity to really interact with these professionals so that they get a better idea of what it is each of these career paths leads to, what it is that they do on a day-to-day basis. Oftentimes I think that what we have in our head about what a certain pathway is, what a certain career is, rarely matches up. And so we want to give them as much information up front as we can. Next slide, please. So we are very early on in this grant. We have hired the grant coordinator, which would be me. We are in the process of recruiting our curriculum writers, and then Winter Storm Uri came along, so we had to push that back just a touch. And we are starting the marketing process and website construction. We want students to be able to apply to be part of the workshop easily online, get all of that information there, and start to get all that set up so that we can recruit and run our first workshops in the summer. So next slide, please. So we got a lot to do over the next year and a half. Obviously, we need to hire our curriculum writers, and I'm really excited about the candidates we have. They are really interested and very excited about this project. We're going to create our advisory committee or advisory board, and together with the curriculum writers, like I said, we're going to sit down and create our objectives and our outcomes for the workshops. We're going to get that all done in the spring and create that first content for the virtual workshops. Then we're going to host our virtual workshops in the summer of 2021. And as I said, we're going to then review it in the fall and re-offer it in the spring. Our goal is to reach 90 students per area, so 30 students per workshop, per pathway. The students will actually be paid to attend. We know it's a lot of time that we're asking of them, up to 120 hours, so we will be paying them to participate and provide feedback to us. And so, as I said, I'm really excited about this concept, this idea of kind of an early intervention and engagement with our students to help them better understand what career options are out there, both from the non-traditional, the apprenticeship side, and the traditional for credit, and how those two kind of work together so that they can create a career path that's going to lead them to long-term success. So Leslie, I turn it back over to you. Dr. James, I don't know if you have anything to add, but I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, I think you did a great job, and I'm delighted to have Jury with us and leading this project. So thank you.
Before I take over, I need to ask a quick housekeeping question and double check. Stephanie, we do the question and answer for this group now, correct?
Yes, so right now we will start the panel 1 Q&A. Sherry's been monitoring the field Q&A within Zoom, and she can pop in and ask those questions. And Leslie, you can start engaging in this conversation about these two presentations.
Okay, perfect. Tricia, I'll start with you first, if that's okay. Are you ready?
I am.
So Tricia, I know that across Texas, there's also some institutions that are working on the College Credit for Heroes program. So can you tell me how College Credit for Heroes might kind of be interwoven or be a part of your grant in the future, and how that would kind of work for those of us that have that grant and are working at looking at how to transcribe all of that credit?
Well, I think that, it would align perfectly, very well. And when we started the first project, the PLA portal project, we actually worked very closely with our College Credit for Heroes leaders, as well as all of our Veterans Affairs offices. And we really started out, in looking at the joint services transcripts, in regards to really expanding PLA and really providing credit for our veterans. And so that's where our numbers in regards to the number of students who actually received college credit through PLA, as well as the number of credits that were awarded, substantially increased. And so we saw a huge increase in those numbers that year. And we actually contributed that to, the initiatives and the efforts that were, gained as a result of that first project. And so those efforts have continued, at Eastville. And so, of course, the College Credit for Heroes project, has also continued in different phases. And they have done, something very similar, in regards to developing those pathways specifically in the programs of study. And so we have a program as a result of the College Credit for Heroes program that really identifies programs of study that students who are veterans who are interested in enrolling in Dallas College can look at in advance and see the type of credit that they would receive if they were entering Dallas College from one of those programs online. And so they could go to our website and see any of those programs and exactly which credentials and which experiential learning from their joint services transcript would tie into the credit that they would receive in those programs of study. So very similar, to the credit for prior learning blended pathways, specifically in industry certifications. And so they really tie, closely together, except, the population that our Blended Pathways project is working with are, for those who not only, are veterans, but others who may not, have that opportunity to receive that experiential learning credit, from military occupations.
Perfect. Now, Sherry, I don't want to hog any time. So do we have anybody else that's posted a question?
Right now, we don't have any posted questions.
Okay, I'll keep going with two other quick questions. So I'm very curious. Tell me if y'all anticipate the transcription costing anything, or will it just be like an evaluation and then posted on their transcript?
For those who are receiving credit for prior learning, there is a fee. Now that may change, as our, transition to a one college model changes. But, of course, that would be in another area, outside of my area. But there is a fee, currently for any prior learning or credit that's receiving transcripted for experiential learning.
So my final question is, I really want to know how you're going to recruit, because I can imagine in your area, you have a huge population that probably has a lot of different credits or even other options that could go into it. So what kind of, and it might not be part of your grant, but how do you envision what might be kind of awareness of this program and then ultimately recruiting for people to come and take advantage of this at your institution?
Well, one of the things that we did, Leslie, in the very first Blended Pathways project, as a part of that project, was to develop marketing materials, so that once the crosswalks were created by the faculty, we could make sure that students had access to that information. And so we created several rack cards for each and every one of those Blended Pathways that was created in the program areas. And if you go to some of our Dallas College campuses, you'll actually see those rack cards on stands, outside of the divisions. And we shared those not only with each academic division or faculty, who were involved in the development of those pathways, but we also shared it with the general advising area, made sure that they knew and understood the blended pathways and could make those available to students. And then, of course, we've used social media, in all of our, virtual marketing opportunities from the very first PLA portal project. I mentioned that we have the PLA portal project platform, but we also have Facebook and Twitter that we still use on a regular basis as a part of the Blended Pathways project to not only, disseminate information about the project, but to also disseminate information about those pathways that are available. And
Leslie, we have a question right
Go ahead,
now.
Sherry.
This is a question for Trisha, I believe. Has there been any formal participation from VA benefits / financial aid experts or decision makers in initiatives for competency-based learning?
And you cut out a little bit, Sherry, but I think I understood your question in regards to engagement of financial aid leadership and administrators in the CBE pathway. Is that correct?
Right.
So that was a very important part and a major piece in the CBE institutes that we wanted to make sure that was included. And so from South Texas College, some of the foundational information that they have been sharing, as well as from the subject matter experts that we've brought in to share how they did what they, did in the development of CBE pathways, that's a critical piece. And so we're making sure that participants have the knowledge of, how financial aid, would work for those students who would be using financial aid, to enroll in these classes. But another thing that, we did when we started the CBE aspect of this project is to make sure that we align the CBE pathways that Dallas College would develop as our faculty are working on that around the same term and, semester setup that we have for our current courses. And so, of course, we have the normal 16-week courses, but we also have 8-week course terms. And so the CBE pathways that, that our faculty are working on now will align with those 8-week term courses, so that they also align with the financial aid requirements in order to be able to, make that accessible to students for CBE.
If you had to characterize, just as a follow-up, Tricia, if you had to characterize like the largest challenge when it comes to aligning benefits from these different policies and procedures, what comes to mind to you?
The largest challenge, and I'm speaking from, the experience with the faculty and some of the things that they've shared with us, because they're the critical piece, in the development of these pathways, is their comfort level and understanding as they go into, development of these pathways, that what they are doing will be in alignment with accrediting agency standards, and then really trying to map that out, in what that looks like in demonstrating and justifying how they get actually awarded that credit. And so, once the faculty, feel comfortable and having those subject matter experts with them along the way has really helped in that regard, as well as having subject matter experts from other institutions who have done this already. Once they feel comfortable with that, that barrier or that hurdle, it starts to feel like it's not quite as high. So, I would say the faculty, engagement, and then their comfort level, in the development of these pathways.
Sherry, I don't see any questions, so I'm going to move to Jerry and Dr. James. Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Jerry,
and I encourage everyone, please remember, use your Q&A box and we'll get your questions voiced immediately.
Jerry, I'm like you. I have a senior. And so what we thought was the pathway has changed rapidly as she's realized there's a whole lot of other opportunities out there than what she thought was kind of a very specific path. So I'm really curious, what's your target audience? Obviously, we're kind of maybe a little late to the game with seniors. So who do you envision coming to your summer institutes, I think is the word you used?
We used workshop, although we're still early on this, and I really want feedback from the people we work with as to what we are going to call it, because I actually think here words matter when it comes to the age group we're looking at from 16 to 24. The type of words we use really do matter to them as to whether or not we're going to be able to draw them in. So that's the age groups we're looking at. So we'll be recruiting with area high schools, as well as at our college, obviously at San Jac, with the academic advisors and hopefully some of the faculty in these particular areas to help us recruit that first set of students. You bring up a really good point in that many students, I don't want to call them kids today because they're not all kids, so come in and they're pretty sure the direction that they're going, and then all of a sudden they're not. And for some of those students, that can be quite an obstacle for them. And so maybe if we could do just a little bit more work up front with them, we could kind of avoid that. For some of them, it's catastrophic. Like they have spent their whole life going in one direction, and that changes for them, and they've lost their identity in that process. And so if we can engage them early on in making those decisions, maybe we can help to eliminate some of that stress for them. So at this point, we're really looking pretty young. But as I was listening to Dr. Jackson this morning, I thought, well, maybe, the second go around, we think about, how can we engage older non-traditional students as well.
I noticed when your response a minute ago, you used some interesting words, because you said hopefully faculty. And I know all of us, probably I'm a little jealous sometimes when their 9-month contract ends. I will admit that. But then
Yeah.
I also know, they usually have things really planned, or sometimes they don't want to stay. So how are you going to overcome that aspect of, you need those faculty members to engage, and you need them to participate, but they might be off contract. So how are you going to address that?
That's a really good question. I don't know that we are that far along in our planning process. Obviously, we're going to be writing the workshops this spring, and so that is part of their contract. And then we also have funds to be able to pay those who obviously are teaching the workshops. So there will be some financial money there that we can work with to pull them in. My biggest concern is not necessarily having them specifically there for the workshop itself, but in that planning and reviewing process. Because long term, we really see an opportunity for faculty to be more involved with this early kind of engagement process. And so, we want to bring them in as soon as possible. So my goal is to start that process this spring while they're on contract still. Dr. James, I don't know if you have more to add to that question.
Yes, I absolutely do. Because at San Jack, we have what's called the Workforce and Economic Development Council with all of the deans, and our health science deans and our deans over business and technology have been involved since we started writing this. And so they've actually given us some ideas of faculty who would be good at working with the curriculum person, the curriculum developer. And quite honestly, even if we paid them or not, I think we've marketed it, or I've marketed it through our WEDC council, that this is a way to encourage more students and greater enrollment in their particular areas. And so it's to their benefit to work with us on this.
Well, I don't see any other questions and answers, but
I
I will tell.
Actually have one, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Is that okay, Leslie?
Absolutely.
This is for both Jerry and for Sally Kay. So you guys have taken on two large major areas in healthcare professions and in IT to really go big. And I'm wondering, even though it's a little early at this stage, have you thought about like a level down in terms of specific occupations that you think are going to be in demand or in demand to learn about by students?
Oh, absolutely. Because when we look at our healthcare and health science programs, we divide those up into the health sciences versus the health occupations. And so since we haven't hired the curriculum director yet, that the person that we're looking at who has applied has a good sense of that. And what we'll be looking at are typically the high demand areas, so that they know that there is a career that they can follow, not just an interest in this area, but if there's not a job to follow, what's the point? And so we're looking at that area along with IT, because we have several IT grants and programs going on that have identified, again, those high need areas. I just got finished with an NSF project that really talked about digital literacy and what that digital literacy is across 6 different career fields. And so we are looking at those as well in terms of a drill down. Both of those fields are very broad, as you stated. And so we will be looking at mainly those high demand areas.
Thank you.
And I would just add to that, part of that employability skills piece that I really want to get across to the students is how to do this work on their own beyond what this 3-week course or workshop is going to be. because they are so broad, right? And so we are going to have to narrow down which career options or pathways we really focus on. But that ability to do that work, that kind of research, every student should know how to go out and learn about different careers before you decide to kind of work into that, particularly something like healthcare, because those are hard programs to get into. You maybe have invested a lot just to get into a program. And so it's imperative for them to learn the skills of that kind of research, career research, before they start to make those investments.
Thanks.
Jerry, any other questions?
Not at this point.
So Tricia, before we do close out this panel, I do have one other quick question for you.
Okay.
Can anyone get on your listserv, or is it just for your grant participants right now?
Absolutely anyone. So if you want to just email me, and I think that Stephanie mentioned that the contact information will be available for everyone, but you can definitely email me and we'll add you to the listserv.
Okay. And before I close out, I saw that Mindy just joined us, so I don't want to close out unless I check with Mindy.
I'm just here to make transition. I don't have a specific question for this group. Your presentations were great. Thank you.
Tricia, Jerry, and Dr. Janes, definitely. I learned a lot and your presentations were great. Thank you so very much. Mindy, I pass it to you.
Very good. Thank you, Leslie, for moderating. Our next panel for curricular innovation will be moderated by Dr. Sally K. Janes, whom we've just heard from in panel one. Just to reiterate, Dr. Janes is Associate Vice Chancellor for Continuing and Professional Development at San Jacinto College. Dr. Janes, I'll turn it over to you to introduce the panels.
All right, thank you very much, Mindy. And I'm just delighted to work with this panel. After reading their resumes and getting to meet them, so to speak, I'm very impressed by all of them. And so our first member of the panel today will come from the Texas State Technical Colleges, and that will be led by Gina Jean. And 10 years ago, Gina came to TSTC as a faculty member. Since then, she has also served as a department chair as well as leading the statewide professional development team before transitioning into her current role as PBE program manager. Her team is responsible for the transition of curriculum to competency-based education, or CBE. Also presenting with her is Karen May. Karen attended the University of North Texas, earning a bachelor's degree in history and international politics and diplomacy in 2008. After graduation, she attended King's College, London, graduating with a master's degree in early modern history in January 2010. I'd love to talk to her about that. She has returned to the United States in 2012, and that fall began teaching history and government classes as an adjunct for Navarro College and later for McLennan Community College in 2015. This year will mark her 9th year working in higher education. In December 19, she completed a degree in web design and development at TSTC and combined those skills with her years of experience in teaching to transition from the classroom to instructional design. Karen has been working on the performance-based education PBE programs under the Perkins grant since October 2019. And so as they move into their presentation on creating performance-based CTE programs for high school and two-year colleges, they really want to create a performance-based program that's designed for these high school kids and students. And I know we don't want to call them kids anymore, but I'm so old, I still look at them that way. And other students that want to or have matriculated to TSTC. So I turn it over now to Gina and Karen.
Thank you for that introduction, Dr. James. Good morning, everyone. Before I get started, I just want to say a huge thank you to Stephanie, Mindy, and the rest of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board team for all their support. It's amazing the amount of information and resources that we have available to us through them. So thank y'all. Everyone has just been amazing to work with. So again, joining me this morning is Karen May, and Karen is the instructional designer funded by the grant. She and I are here to share with you more about that project, creating performance-based CTE programs for high school and 2-year. We're in the 2nd year of that project, and it's definitely been an interesting 11 months, as I'm sure everybody joining us today can relate to. So next slide, please. So at Texas State Technical College, we are currently transitioning our curriculum over to course-based, competency-based education. Now, we've named our CBE initiative performance-based education, or PBE. That's just the internal name that we call it, but it is course-based CBE. And the purpose of this grant was really to ensure that our planned CBE processes do not impede our dual enrollment needs and goals. We want to make sure that everything that we are going to be implementing is functional for our dual enrollment partners and doesn't negatively impact our students, right? So a lot of times it's easy when you're doing these large modality changes to focus on, we have a large non-traditional population of students and so forth, but we didn't want to lose fact of we've also got these dual enrollment partnerships, and what do our students in the K-12 realm need as far as CBE is concerned? Next slide, please. So originally, the 3 programs that we had identified on the grant were going to be welding, computer networking, and architectural drafting and design. However, due to a change in our institutional timeline, the welding program was replaced on the grant with cybersecurity last year. And we had also originally planned to launch our competency-based programs last fall. However, these plans had to be postponed when the college had to transition operations in response to COVID last March. And so we are now planning to launch both cybersecurity and computer networking and systems technology as PBE programs this fall, and the architectural drafting and design program will be launched live in fall of 2022. And one of the largest impacts that COVID had on our project has been the conversion of many of our programs, including the 3 I just mentioned, over to being 100% online. Previously, some of these programs were taught hybrid and some 100% online, but everybody had a face-to-face component, and all of those have since transitioned to being 100% online for safety purposes. So much of the work that we've had to do had to be adjusted also to work around remote faculty scheduling and adapting for our team as well to a remote work environment, and that transition to a 100% online curriculum. Next slide, please. So what are the project objectives? What are we trying to achieve with the grant? So the primary objectives for the project revolve around the assessment, conversion, and development of high quality competency-based curriculum. And this process all begins with the evaluation and deconstruction of the curriculum into course competencies and learning objectives. The instructional designer then works with our subject matter experts, our faculty members, to evaluate what needs to be taught in the classes. This also involves conferring with our industry advisory boards and working closely with them. So we utilize Skills Engine Calibrate to have industry validate our course competencies and ensure we're aligned with their needs. Once we've completed that deconstruction process, then the instructional designer begins working with the faculty members. We call them content matter experts on curriculum development. And each of the programs, again, is now being taught 100% online. But if we did have a hybrid program, the hybrid classes would have a flipped classroom approach to their teaching. So again, we want to make sure we're reviewing our processes, everything that we're designing against what is needed for our dual credit partnerships, to make sure we are not impacting the functionality and relationships we have with those partners. We are planning to hold a meeting with our dual enrollment team internally at TSTC, along with our committee members and any representatives they may have in the next few weeks. Now that we've refined our processes, we're through with deconstruction and fairly well into development, getting some of that feedback from them to make sure we aren't negatively impacting our relationships and their needs. So additionally, now that we're in those final stages and finishing up with that deconstruction, we've been building those learning journeys and course content with the goal of ensuring the course content not only remains high quality, but thinking about those learners, that younger group, right? They have shorter attention spans. You have to keep them engaged. So highly engaging and interactive content is the goal, making sure that that is what we are building in to our courses. And as that content is being developed, that deconstruction outline is the blueprint. Next slide, please. So the grant deliverables include all of those course deconstruction outlines, and Karen will share more of what one of those looks like here in a moment. But all of the deconstruction outlines for each of the courses in those AAS degrees for the 3 programs. Additionally, we have the Skills Engine Calibrate reports for the job profiles, which we get all those detailed work activities that we utilize in the deconstruction process, doing gap analysis to make sure that we don't miss any of those critical skills for the job profiles. And then we also run our competencies through Skills Engine Calibrate that gets sent out to industry. Industry will validate those competencies to ensure that we are meeting industry needs with what we are going to be doing in the classroom. So while the purpose of the grant is focused on the 3 programs I mentioned, we are actually on the vision team, which Karen is a part of, and I oversee. We are working on launching 6 programs over to PBE for this fall. And again, that curriculum for the one hybrid program, 5 of those 6 programs are online. One of them is actually a hybrid program, our HVAC program, and that's a flipped classroom approach. And we're being very deliberate in how we are going to build and work with those students. So finally, that actual curriculum that's being built, right? The goal, again, that ensuring that that curriculum, not just high quality and of appropriate rigor, and working through the industry validation of what we're going to be teaching, but making sure that whenever possible, we are building that highly engaging interactive content. And in order to do so, that's time consuming. That's where Karen's played a huge part. She's also going to show you all a couple of examples of some of the activities she has built for one of the programs. And we want to make sure that our students are regularly able to interact with that content, right? That we don't just need observers. We want them actively going and engaging in that learning experience. Most of the students we get at TSTC, that's the type of learning experience they are looking for. That is what they expect from us. And so even though we're teaching online, we want to make sure that that is something that we are delivering on as well. Next slide, please. So where are we at? What have we been doing? The grant committee has been meeting regularly. It's composed of a mix of higher education as well as some of our dual enrollment partners. Representing the K-12 sector, we have Donna McKethan representing the Greater Waco Greater Waco Advanced Manufacturing Academy, and Elizabeth Brownlee representing the Connolly Career Tech Early College High School. Previously, we also had Herman Pereira with Connolly Career Tech. Herman has moved on to other opportunities, but he continues to be active as a committee member as time permits. And we've been holding our regular quarterly meetings and updating the committee on the progress that has been made. Karen has presented to them as well and shown them some of what she's been doing. And she's actually been requested to come in and do training for the different college or high schools for their faculty on helping them learn how to create more engaging online content. So as we meet each quarter, we sit down, we discuss, okay, here's the progress that's been made. Here's what the types of content we're developing. Here's an example of the deconstruction. Really, a lot of the discussion is more along the processes. What is scheduling going to look like? Now that it's online, that's less of an issue, but previously when we were going to hold face-to-face classes, that was a big deal. And actually competency-based really was going to provide so much flexibility for those on-campus classes. They were very excited about that. So the grant provided us with Karen to build that content, to do the deconstruction. We get rave reviews from the department she works with. And she, as well as the other instructional designers have been working with the programs on that deconstruction and curriculum development. I do want to mention that sharing what we have done is a large part of what we are trying to do as well. We've presented at the Fast Track to Success and CB Exchange conferences. And last summer, the team and I and El Paso Community College partnered and held a week-long CBE Institute that was very well received. And we are planning to hold a second one this summer as well. Additionally, Karen has built faculty training via a website and the Canvas course template that is going to be used for all of our CBE courses. And that will be used with multiple programs across the college. So again, a large part, everything we do at TSTC, we want to make sure it's a value. And we partner with those industry partners, the advisory board members, to make sure. So as we're going through, one of those deliverables will be those reports, the job profile reports that we use at the beginning of deconstruction, the validation reports that will be built through industry reviewing and providing feedback on the competencies. All of that will be included as a part of the deliverable, and it's a huge focus of what we do. If industry were to review one of our competencies and the information, if that came back with a need to change, we would be adjusting our curriculum to make sure we are building in that functionality they're looking for in an employee and our students. So that is, again, all done using Skills Engine Calibrate. And additionally, once again, the focus, everything is about that curriculum, right? Making sure it's highly interactive, engaging, and of course, aligned with industry. And now Karen is going to share a bit more with y'all about deconstruction. What does that look like? And show some examples of the content she's been working on.
All right, thank you, Gina. So the biggest area of the project for me is working directly with faculty on their deconstruction and development for their courses. Deconstruction is really the first part of this process where we break down the course curriculum to its most basic parts and then rebuild it to fit our competency-based model. When I sit down with a faculty member and we start having this conversation about deconstruction, one of the first things we talk about is, what is the overall purpose of their course? Should a student take this? What would they walk away with? What sort of applicable skill would they have at the end of this? And that ultimately comprises our course goal. And what that really does is it helps to focus that conversation and the deconstruction on getting to that ultimate end goal. So once we have that established, we start to draw a framework of the course by defining the sort of broad categories and subcategories that fall within that. And we use the WECM outcomes to help identify sort of where we should be looking on there. And basically what we're doing is we're just drawing the boundaries of the course, what we're including. Once we have that framework in place, we can start to break down the course on a smaller level, looking at the individual KSAs and the knowledges that we want the students to take away from the course, those very specific little things. Once we have those broken down within the categories, we can then group them together under learning objectives and competencies. And so if we can move to the next slide, I have an excerpt from one of our deconstructions. Thank you. So this is an excerpt from a deconstruction for the Drafting 1345 class. This class is usually taken either in the first or second semester, and it's really the first exposure that these drafting students will have to 3D modeling. So you can see here in the example, the individual knowledges in black that are broken down. Those are then collected under learning objectives and then assessed through competencies. You can see this course is fairly heavy on learning objectives and competencies because, again, it's a first or second semester course. It's taken very early and they're learning brand new skills. So we want to make sure that we have these kind of, I guess, checkpoints almost in place for students, that they're learning what they need to learn. When we're writing the learning objectives and competencies, we also want to be very mindful on the language that we're using to describe what it is the student's doing, because we want these competencies and learning objectives to indicate the actions that the student is taking, what they are doing, and we're using very faithfully our Bloom's taxonomy to ensure these competencies and learning objectives are measurable and can then be plugged into the skills engine Calibrate that Gina mentioned earlier. You can also see here the relationship between the learning objectives and competencies. For example, if we look at the first competency in this class, we have recognized the connection between 2D views and 3D models. So again, this is one of the first times students will be working in that 3D model space. And so it's important to draw that connection between what they've been doing previously, drawing on a flat sheet of paper, to making 3D models. And underneath that, there are two learning objectives, those first two on the list. And that is to be able to identify when they're presented with a 2D view or an orthographic view, and to be able to draw them. So if you're given a 3D model, draw the views. If you're given views, sketch a 3D model. And that kind of helps to reinforce that connection so that as they're going on to learn this 3D software, that's always in the back of their mind. Now, once we have this course blueprint in place, we can start evaluating our resources and creating instructional content and activities for the students. With our cybersecurity and computer networking courses, that task is made a lot easier because so much of what they do is already done in a virtual environment. And they're used to working in there. Drafting has been more of a challenging case for us because a lot of these classes were taught with face-to-face courses, and a lot of it is having to bring actual physical things into a virtual environment. And so I've got a couple of examples for how we're doing that. So if we can look at the next slide, please. So what I have here is a little demo of a interactive activity, a scales activity for architectural scales. So learning to use and read scales is one of the first things that students do, and normally they do it in the classroom using these, actual physical scales. But that's not an option for us. in a virtual environment online. And so we needed to be able to take this physical action and move it into the online world. So this activity allows for a student to choose a scale. So usually they have this sort of multi-sided thing here, and it's got 6 different scales on it. And what they needed to be able to do is choose the correct scale and then accurately scale each of the lines that's given to them. This activity is normally presented in conjunction with a multiple choice quiz that we create with targeted answer choices, meaning that each of the wrong answer choices represent common mistakes that students might make when using the scales. Either they've chosen the wrong scale, maybe they're reading the wrong tick mark because the scales overlap each other, or they're using the scale incorrectly. And particularly with the architectural scales, that's a very common mistake that students make. And so we wanted all of our wrong answer choices to indicate or to reflect these different mistakes so that we could include specific feedback to the student on what they did wrong, and that way they can understand and fix it and then try again. So trying to combine that kind of immediate interaction that they might get from raising their hand and asking a question in the classroom with a physical activity made virtual, as you can see here. And so on the next slide, I've got a slightly different activity, but also, again, focusing on this idea of bringing something that you would normally do on pen and paper into a virtual world. And so here we have an example of an interactive planner specifically for designing residential floor plans. This is for our sort of second semester introduction to residential drafting class. And one of the first steps in designing a floor plan is to think about what rooms you're going to include, how they're going to flow together, like where the doorways are, how they're going to move, what the setup is. And you do that by drawing a bubble diagram. So what this activity has here are the various different bubbles that represent the rooms, and the student can move rooms around, arrange, rearrange, and just sort of play with their design all in this activity, which they can then turn in as part of their sort of design plan, or they can print it out or anything like that. So it's really a tool meant to take something that, again, they would have normally done with pencil and paper and move it into this virtual environment. This also makes it much easier for instructors to give feedback on this, because again, you don't have to worry about, trying to see someone's drawing in a picture that they took with their phone or something like that. So it's really taking that activity and transferring it over. And these really make up just a couple of examples of the ways that we're working to try and build this highly interactive and engaging content aimed at enhancing the learning experience for our students, and also making the transition from face-to-face to online and remote easier for the students as well as the faculty, who are very much used to teaching face-to-face and miss that interaction. And so we want to give them as many tools as we can just to make it easier on them to make that transition as well, or transition, excuse me, as well. So these are just a couple examples of that.
All right, thank you so much, Karen.
So it appears that we are moving on and moving into our next presentation from Alamo College and Frank Phillips College. And the presenters there will be Miss Bethany Calloway, and she is the inaugural Director of Nursing for RNEC. Prior to the development of this RNEC, Bethany served as the Director of Nursing for Frank Phillips College. Bethany has been involved in nursing education since 2015. Ms. Calloway began her nursing career as a graduate of Amarillo College, working at a critical access hospital in the rural Texas Panhandle. She received her MSN from Aspen University. And joining her from Frank Phillips College is Dr. Shannon Carroll, who is the Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs in Borger, where she has worked for the last 24 years. Her academic discipline is actually English, but she has worked with both academic transfer and career technology education, including nursing. Along with her president, Dr. Judd Hicks, and the president of Amarillo College, Dr. Russell Lowry Hart, she envisioned a nursing program that would meet the needs of the rural communities in the Panhandle of Texas. Under her leadership, the Rural Nursing Education Consortium, the RNEC, was approved and funding was secured for the program. She wrote a funded Title III grant in 2001 and co-wrote a funded Title III grant in 2020, which provided funds for a new information management system and a new learning system. She has served as the SACS COC liaison since 2008 and led the college through 2 reaffirmation cycles, and I know what that's all about, a 5-year report and 22 substantive changes. She has also chaired several student success initiatives at Frank Phillips College. Her area of expertise is the physical spaces in which community colleges learn. And so I'm delighted to present to you this Rural Nursing Education Consortium with Amarillo College and Frank Phillips College, which is a true collaboration to help folks on a pathway in healthcare to a nursing credential. So please help me welcome Bethany Calloway and Dr. Shannon Carroll.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Shannon Carroll, and I'm going to give you the background and the introduction to how our initiative came about. And then Bethany will give the update on year 1, which is our pilot year. So next slide, please. Thank you. Our foundation is that we have 5 rural hospitals up in the Texas Panhandle, serving, as you know, very isolated, small communities. And they have experienced great nursing shortages, in particular with the ADN nurses at the hospitals, but even the LVN shortage in doctors' offices and nursing homes. 2 of our colleges, Frank Phillips and Amarillo College, were approached by various hospitals asking for help. And both of us have really strong nursing programs. So in a meeting, we determined that maybe a good way to collaborate would be to share the space at 5 of our campuses and let Frank Phillips College teach the LVN certificate program and let Amarillo College teach the ADN. And this has required a great deal of equipment, which was all 100% grant funded. The hospitals are underwriting the cost of the instructors. And in effect, our funding model is that all of the tuition and fees, as well as any contact hour reimbursement, are put towards the cost, and the hospitals collectively will cover the rest of the cost of running the program, which turns out to be the faculty members. So they're underwriting the cost of faculty for both programs. We are sharing spaces and have outfitted those with the technology so that all of the campuses are available and capable of a distance learning model, regardless of where the teacher is originating the instruction. So we formed an executive board that is made up of 5 hospital CEOs, and those hospitals are in Borger, Dumas, Perryton, Dalhart, and Hereford. And then the 2 college presidents, Dr. Russell Lowry Hart, and at the time, Dr. Judd Hicks, and we have a new president now. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we have gotten board approval from all of the hospitals and colleges to enter into this memorandum of understanding, which has been signed by all 7 executive directors at the hospitals and the colleges. Frank Phillips has received permission from SAC-COC to offer the full program at Hereford and Dumas, which are campuses of Amarillo College. And so we had to do a sub change to offer our nursing program at 2 new campuses. We spoke with the Texas Board of Nursing and got approval, and we now are actually listed as an entity on the Board of Nursing in terms of the pass rate. We had to tweak the curriculum because we wanted to make sure that any students joining into the LVN program would be qualified in terms of the prerequisites to join the Amarillo College ADN program. And basically what we ended up doing was cutting some of the hours out of the LVN program and consolidating 2 of our courses, medical terminology and nutrition, are now offered as continuing education classes at no charge to the students, but those were removed to keep us under the 60-hour or at the 60-hour cap for both programs. We secured all of, and Amarillo College has done the same thing, but we have secured the required notifications through HERC and our Board of Regents and our Academic Standards and Curriculum Committee, our nursing committees, and advisory boards. And so that's the progress that we had made as we began the pilot year this year. Next slide. Thank you. We had a lot of discussion about how we should really ground our program, because Frank Phillips College only serves rural communities, and Amarillo College is a middle-sized urban institution. So we determined that the best course of action would be for the FPC nursing director to step up and be the director of RNAC, because she has the experience teaching with the rural communities, also nursing in a rural hospital, and exhaustive use of distance learning equipment to teach from Borger to Perryton and Dalhart, or from either of those campuses back to the other 2. The faculty for each campus will be approved by FPC and Amarillo College, as well as the executive board. Now, each program is standalone and independent. So Frank Phillips hired hired the faculty for the LVN program, and Amarillo College will hire the faculty for the ADN program. But in hopes of keeping our consortium well informed and as strong as possible, we have agreed that we would all look at all of the candidates as well and determine who is best suited for each campus and how all of that's going to work. Each campus will have a full-time LVN instructor and a full-time associate degree of nursing instructor. Right now, we do not have ADN instructors because this is our pilot year where we're piloting LVN, and next year we will begin our pilot of the ADN program. So we're all in the process of determining who those faculty will be and how the decisions about admission will work and how students will apply for that transition from LVN into ADN. The instructors stay with the students at their campus, and they may be employed by the hospital, but their primary job is to serve the needs of the students and to teach and run the clinical rotations for each of their campuses. So at any time that we are in session, they are working for Frank Phillips College and Amarillo College with the students at the college campus and then going into the clinical sites. And again, we have campuses in Borger, Dalhart, Perryton, and for Amarillo College, Dumas, and Hereford. And this is covering a very large section. To go from Dalhart to Hereford is about a 3.5 hour drive. So we're very vast, and the only way to really make this work was to employ the distance learning technology, which we are using via live instructional television. We have done this at Frank Phillips for a long time, and it's working very well. So everyone is outfitted, all of the equipment is purchased, and we're alternating space and sharing the didactic classroom and sharing the lab for simulation and whatever other space that we need to share. And I will hand this over to Bethany to begin talking about our first pilot year.
Sorry, I think we can go ahead and advance 2 slides. Shannon covered the course delivery, which is the live instructional television. But I'll pick up at year 1. And I think have we covered this, Shannon?
I think you can expand, Bethany, on where we are with Amarillo College in that process.
Okay. So we are currently teaching our first cohort of LVN students at all 5 campuses, and it is going well. They're actually joining. We're able to combine them on occasion so that they can do simulation activities. With the facilities being in rural hospitals, there are some nursing experiences that they will not see, or that maybe only one student would get to see. So some of those experiences, like a delivery of a complicated birth where there's a problem during delivery, we go ahead and do that in the simulation lab. And in order for everyone to have the expertise of our particular instructors, we have the students rotate and come to the campuses, and we do have funding that helps pay for their travel expenses during that. Amarillo College is now entering the process of setting up their application and selection process. We have consolidated our applications so that students can apply through one application. So our goal is that our students that are entering as an LVN will not have to reapply to the program. It's just one continuous program for those LVN students. And then Amarillo College and Frank Phillips will work together to make sure that all of the pieces of the application get to the people that need them, so that all the paperwork is there. Students are wanting to transition in. We've got several in all of our communities that already have their LVN that have been unable to transition to RN because of the travel that they would have had they would have had to drive at least an hour and a half to Amarillo to get that RN. They're now being able to apply to this program to transition in as well. And so we're working with Amarillo College to ensure that we have all of the pieces they need for that. But the distance technology is working really well for us. We've had minimal problems using the technology to reach all of our students. Go ahead and advance. So COVID considerations, like everyone else, COVID impacted us. At the beginning of this year, we have limited our students. We have been able to remain on campus. However, our students have not been able to get together in large groups as often as we wanted. And so typically we meet once a month to just instill that community, and so that our students from all 5 campuses feel like they are a part of one cohort, and they do online learning. with each other every day, but then they also outside of class spend a lot of time doing study sessions with each other. So we may have students from Dalhart and students from Perryton doing like a Skype meeting to study for exams. And so we try to foster that through monthly gatherings for our students. We haven't been able to do that this year. We did have one hospital that we were unable to get into initially for clinical. However, a second hospital, Dumas and Borger, are only about 30 minutes apart, and Dumas happily took our Borger students in. So our Borger students were able to go ahead and have the clinical experience rather than having to do 100% simulation. Other than that, when our students did have to be quarantined during the fall semester, we had a couple of times that we had an exposure at one of our campuses. They were able to quarantine, and thankfully our new learning system has a virtual classroom aspect to it. So we were able to put the classroom on live for the students that were at home, and they were able to access class from their house. Our size is capped at 10. We only have one clinical instructor for each campus. So each campus is allowed to have 10 students so that we meet that limitation with the board that each clinical instructor only has 10 students at a time. We can go ahead and advance. So I think the things that we really have tried to emphasize is that each college does have autonomy over their program. While RNEC is one, it feels like one program for the students, Amarillo College is the one that gives the degree for the associate's degree. We award the certificate for LVN. And so as far as the objectives and how the class is taught, that is retained by the college. But RNEC is able to look in and advise as far as how those objectives can best be met in the rural facilities. It is a transition model from LVN to ADN. So we do not have students that start at any of our facilities with the intent of going straight to ADN. They all will stop and get their LVN or license prior to starting that transition program. The CEOs, again, the hospitals don't influence the colleges in any way as far as what we, how we teach or the objectives that we have. They aren't involved in the admission program, so we are able to set our standards and retain those. There's not influence as far as if a student worked for a hospital, they would still have to meet the standards that the colleges have set. We can advance to the next. So final thoughts, we've had 100% pass rate at Frank Phillips for the last 5 years. And at this point in time, actually our 5th year is official now. At this point in time, we seem to be on track for this first cohort to meet that standard. All of our benchmarking that we've done shows that our students are maintaining the excellence that we expect. We do have a significant number of applicants. Our application pool increased by about 50% last year, and it looks to stay on par this year. So we had about 120 students that started out showing interest in the program. And we did have right at 50 students that were actually accepted to the program after they had completed all of their prereqs. Some of them did choose to withdraw their application because of COVID and the potential for having the online learning. We have since had West Texas A&M University join RNEC. They offer their BSN, the RN to BSN and the MSN degrees through online learning. That they are collaborating with us for those clinical experiences at the rural facilities. So we are excited about that as well. Shannon, do you have anything to add?
I will add that Up in the Panhandle, Clarendon College is a third community college that we sort of form a triangle. And Clarendon has a partnership with Texas Tech University to do a transition into their BSN program. We did reach out to Clarendon, and at the time they chose to continue with that partnership, but we have had some conversations to include them because they also have rural hospitals in Pampa and Childress that are in need of some qualified nurses. So we're all hoping this will become a Panhandle wide consortium.
Okay. Thank you very, very much, Shannon, and excuse me, for you all's presentation, Sharon and Shannon and Bethany. Sorry, my throat got caught up there a minute. Like to move on now to the Perkins leadership presentation from South Texas College, and you.
Just lost sound.
Hey, Sally Kay, you muted for, I don't know what happened. So if you could unmute and continue, there you go.
Okay, I'll start over then. Thank you. Well, first of all, I don't know if you heard my thank you for Bethany and Shannon, but I want to say thank you to them and look forward to further conversation. But as we move on now to the presentation from South Texas College by Dr. Kevin Peak, we've already heard that he is in collaboration with Dallas College. And so I'm looking forward to really hearing him expand on what they are doing at South Texas. But Dr. Peak earned his PhD in the May of 2000. And shortly after that, he founded the Trade Policy Research Group based in San Francisco. His formal academic employment includes professional and administrative positions at the University of Nevada, Vista College in Berkeley, Northwestern Michigan College, and Victoria College in Texas, as well as now South Texas College. His experience with competency-based education is extensive. He's done program development and administration and includes the position of chair of the CBE Bachelor's Program in organizational leadership at South Texas, which was the first 100% CBE Bachelor's Program in the state of Texas. He's been director of grant-funded project to create a CBE Bachelor's Program in Computer Information Technology and in collaboration with Austin Community College. He's also been director of a grant-funded project to create CBE Bachelor's Program in Medical and Health Service Management, director of a project to create a CBE Professional Certificate Program in Accounting, and another one in technology management, and mentoring to work to support the creation of CBE Bachelor's Programs in colleges and universities throughout the United States that include the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, and Nichols College in Boston. Dr. Peak recently published a book on CBE entitled Competency-Based Education Made Easy that is being used in institutions of higher education all around the country. He is currently directing the development of 2 regional seminars on CBE with funding provided by 2 competitive grants that will be available to post-secondary institutions interested in creating competency-based education programs. Dr. Peak, with all your experience, I can't wait to hear from you.
Oh, thank you so much for the presentation. I'm sorry about putting everything but the kitchen sink in there. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I started to cut some out, but I thought there's nothing I want to cut out. I think everybody ought to know.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to my presentation. My name is Kevin Peak. It's an honor to be here, and I deeply appreciate the time you are taking to join me. My presentation today is based on a project entitled Advancing Completion and Employability in Information Technology. The presentation describes a model that we used to develop 2 new and innovative programs in information technology in our information technology department, with the purpose of increasing the number of students that graduate with professional experience and a marketable credential. This model, known as the ACE-IT model, combines competency-based education courses, prior learning assessment, and apprenticeship opportunities, and can really be applied to any workforce discipline. I look forward to sharing this model with you today in my presentation. Next slide, please. The order in which topics will be presented begins with an overview of the ACE-IT model, continues with a description of the 3 main components of this model, and concludes with a review of our progress and project modifications. Next slide, please. The 3 main components of the ACE-IT model that are built into our new IT programs include prior learning assessment, competency-based education, or CBE courses, and apprenticeship opportunities. Students enrolled in the IT programs, or really any program developed with the ACE-IT model, follow the same basic steps. First, students are evaluated to receive credit for prior learning. This, as we know, is referred to as PLA, and may take the form of military training, employment training and experience, and previous education. Second, students enroll in courses in the CBE format that are affordable, accelerated, and accessible. Third, while taking CBE courses, students are assigned an apprenticeship opportunity with a local employer. That one's proven to be a little bit tricky, but we'll get into that later. The first 2 components, PLA and CBE courses, give students the academic credentials needed to qualify for jobs in the labor market. While the third component, apprenticeship opportunities, prepares them to answer the question that inevitably arises during almost any interview, and we've all heard it. What practical experience do you have in this field? This presentation will now proceed by looking at each one of the components of the ACE-IT model in more depth. Next slide, please. The first component of the ACE-IT model is to apply prior learning assessment to all students before they initially enroll in classes. PLA is defined by the American Council of Education as learning gained outside the college classroom in a variety of settings and through formal and non-formal means. Specifically, through the application of PLA, college credit is conferred for previously acquired competencies that are approved as equivalent to the curriculum contained in courses in an IHE's course inventory. Examples of PLA include, but are not limited to, military training and coursework, industry recognized certificates, professional studies and training, civic and volunteer activities, and student portfolios. Next slide, please. After students are reviewed for PLA, the second component of the ACE-IT model is to enroll students in competency-based education courses. The CBE courses that we developed for our IT programs, as mentioned earlier, are affordable, accessible, and accelerated, and offer unique opportunities to students that are not available in traditional educational formats. In the following slides, I will continue with a brief description of CBE and examples of the attributes that make CBE courses ideal for workforce programs created with the ACE-IT model. Next slide, please. The decision to include CBE courses in our model was based on an extensive success with CBE courses at our institution and confirmatory evidence in numerous other post-secondary institutions of its relevance and effectiveness in workforce programs. To better understand why our model includes CBE courses and how they benefit workforce students, let's briefly define CBE both conceptually and operationally. I won't bore you by reading the definition too that we have up there on the screen, but if you could indulge me, I would appreciate you just taking a minute to look through it. It's pretty detailed and complicated. This is probably even longer than the bio that I sent in, and maybe even a little bit less pompous. Anyhow, next slide, please. So in addition to standard definitions, like the one on the previous slide that can be a little complicated, one of the best ways to understand competency-based education and what it offers workforce students and programs is through identifying shared characteristics that operationally define competency-based education. With this in mind, we will briefly review leading characteristics that operationally define CBE and help to illuminate how CBE courses benefit workforce students. And once again, all of these components are built into the ACE IT model that we've developed thanks to the funding of the Perkins Foundation. So first, learning and assessment in CBE are individualized. CBE theory is firmly grounded in the premise that students learn in different ways, and that to the extent possible, instruction and assessment should be tailored accordingly. Some students prefer visual instruction, while others are auditory learners. Some learn best through logical models, and others through abstraction. And still other students thrive in group interaction, while others are more accustomed to work alone. Developing CBE courses that adapt to the rich diversity of student learning styles is not always easy, but it's proven over and over again to promote student success and foments a positive learning environment for existing and returning students. Second, assessment is primarily formative in CBE courses. Beginning with primary education, student assessment in the United States, and we know this, is almost entirely summative. In a typical elementary, junior high, or high school class, students are required to take a predetermined number of exams at regularly scheduled intervals that purportedly measure their overall understanding of the course material covered since the previous exam. The concern with this approach is that summative evaluations are comparatively less amenable to measuring all of the compensation or competencies that a student should master for a given academic workforce course. I know somebody mentioned earlier that they're an English instructor, so this might be a particularly relevant example. Let's assume that an introductory English class at College X expects students to learn the following: pre-writing process, essay construction, critical analysis, and writing revision skills. A student who passes a summative exam of these learning outcomes with a 70% or better, which is usually what's expected, may not have sufficiently mastered all of them, or in a worst case scenario, has passed the exam without demonstrating any understanding of one or more of the learning outcomes. This, of course, depending upon the weight of each learning outcome in the grading rubric. On the other hand, in a series of formative exams, preferably in real time, the English instructor facilitator would assess student competency of each of the learning outcomes. This approach is more thorough and rigorous, as the majority of CB programs only award credit only after students have passed all course competencies. This approach is well suited to workforce students who will be expected to master all the requirements of a particular job. Further, students progress through courses at their own pace in CBE programs. There can be little doubt that students not only learn in different ways, but at different rates. CBE programs, in addition to eliminating the aforementioned expectation that students complete a course in a predetermined period of time, allow them to move through course material at their own pace. Instead of requiring students to complete an exercise, reading assignment, or exam by a specific date and time, CBE courses are configured to allow them, under the guidance of a course instructor facilitator, to decide when they are ready to progress through course content. CBE programs are also usually more dynamic and responsive to ever-changing labor market requirements, and better prepare students to compete in the modern globalized workforce. Some of the most well-known complaints expressed by employers, and this has gone into the development of our program, is that university graduates that they are receiving have problems with their reading, writing, and mathematics skills. They're unable to apply what they learn in the classroom to real-life situations. They have neglected their soft skills, particularly group activity and oral communication, and they're poorly equipped to adapt to rapidly changing conditions in the workforce. Competency-based education, CBE courses, in many ways, have evolved as a direct response to these and other concerns, and is becoming increasingly popular among employers seeking graduates with credentials that more closely align with modern labor market requirements and who have received experiential training. That's the key point. Experiential training and assessment that better prepares them to professionally apply what they have learned. Next slide, please. CBE also gives students a more realistic idea of what they will be doing in their chosen profession. And this is one of my favorite attributes of CBE education, because as mentioned earlier, a lot of students start off knowing what they want, but sometimes they don't make the necessary changes and they end up in a profession that they're not entirely happy with. One of the core premises of CBE is that learning and assessment should not be limited to traditional classrooms or online courses, but when appropriate, occur in an environment and or under circumstances that most closely replicate where a student is likely to be employed. The advantage of this approach, aside from documented improvements in employer and employee performance, is that it not only helps students decide what they want to do in their careers, but perhaps even more important, what they don't want to do. Everyday workforce students abandon their career after discovering it's not what they expected. CBE helps to ameliorate this problem before it gets started. Next, CBE programs generally contain stringent quality control mechanisms and emphasize ongoing program review and improvement. In order to remain viable and comply with a core mandate of CBE to prepare students for constantly evolving labor market requirements, the vast majority of CBE programs at the post-secondary level understand and take very seriously the importance of continuous review and improvement. Learning and assessment strategies, course competency content, educational technology, instructor knowledge, and pedagogical proficiency, and other essential components of quality CBE programs are integral to student success, and as such are regularly evaluated and updated. This means that workforce students are learning skills that will enhance their competitiveness in an ever-changing world. Next slide, please. So, in addition to PLA, which we covered earlier, and our CBE courses, the ACE-IT model, and once again, this is what we're looking at, this ACE-IT model that we've created for our students, and that we've developed 2 IT programs based on, that's funded by this generous grant. So in addition to PLA and CBE courses, the ACE-IT model also includes apprenticeship opportunities. Every time I say that, I get a certain degree of trepidation and a lump in my throat. So their apprenticeship opportunities are in this model that give workforce students the experience that will complement their new credentials. Next slide, please. Too often, students graduate with quality credentials only to discover that they lack sufficient workforce experience to be employable. This is a classic problem with all of our programs, and it's not limited to career and technology, our academic programs, our all of our programs. Our students graduate and they have some fantastic credentials because we have an outstanding educational system in Texas, but they don't have that practical experience. The inclusion of an apprenticeship component in the ACE-IT model addresses this problem. Workforce students enrolled in a program that applies this model receive instruction from their college and on-the-job training at the respective apprenticeship locations throughout the duration of the workforce educational program. During the first and second semesters, or the equivalent, depending upon the institution, the apprentices are not compensated monetarily, but during additional semesters, once again, or the equivalent, as required, they are paid by the employers participating in the program. At the end of the program, students complete their certificates, have acquired valuable on-the-job experience, and may be contracted permanently by the employer that offered them the apprenticeship. You know, it's a win-win situation for everyone that gives workforce students marketable credentials, real-world experience, and the opportunity to progress at an accelerated rate. Next slide, please. So now that we have reviewed PLA, the CBE courses, and the apprenticeship opportunities in the ACE-IT model that we created, let's briefly review some of the goals of the ACE-IT model overall and built into the grant. First, this particular model, and this model, or in this particular project, this model was applied originally to developing 2 information technology programs. But this model can be applied to any workforce program. In fact, as I'll mention in a few moments, we're also applying it to the development of 4 workforce programs. So let's briefly review some of the goals of the ACE-IT model. First, it makes education more affordable, and that's what we need. You know, I am by training an economist, and we're in for some rocky times over the next few years. COVID-19 hopefully will be beyond us, but the economic effects on us, on our communities, and our students are going to be dire. So whatever we can do to reduce the costs is welcome. Students enrolled in programs based on this model save money in a number of different ways. For example, a flat tuition rate per term is recommended for college and universities that use this model. The average cost of tuition for a 4-year university in Texas is around $7,813 per year. In many rural and metropolitan zones with per capita income levels significantly below the state and national average, this price tag makes a degree or credential literally inaccessible for many potential students. Fortunately, when students pay a flat rate for all courses that they enroll in and progress more rapidly, and that's a component of this program, and progress more rapidly due to credit awarded for past knowledge and experience, PLA, and the overall cost is much lower. A second goal met by the ACE-IT model is to make education more accessible. For example, a significant amount of our students are adult learners between the ages of 24 and 35 that include a high percentage of working adults, single parents, individuals below the poverty line, and students located in remote areas. For many of these individuals, the limited availability of college university programs that are affordable and accommodate their respective schedules has constituted a significant barrier to acquiring marketable credentials. The highly effective 100% online courses offered in the ACE-IT model programs ensure that all courses are available on a 24-hour basis. A third goal met by the ACE-IT model is to accelerate the acquisition of marketable credentials. Once again, this is going to be tremendously important. According to some of the most recent local labor market projections, as well as data coming from the Bureau of Labor Market Statistics, at least in our part of Texas, southern Texas, what we're anticipating is that 40% of the jobs in career and technical areas are going to be, in the short term or long term, adversely affected in our region because of COVID-19. We need to provide those workers with quick, quality training that's commensurate with their level of knowledge, and that will provide them with opportunities. So, third goal met by the ACE-IT model, as mentioned, is to accelerate the acquisition of marketable credentials. Programs that use the ACE-IT model shorten the average time to graduation without sacrificing educational quality, through awarding credit for previous coursework and professional training, as we mentioned, enabling students to obtain credit for courses by demonstrating mastery of course content in standardized exams. That's part of the CBE course model, and providing an extensive inventory of quality educational resources. As time is of the essence, I'd like to go on to the next slide and just briefly discuss our progress and some of the modifications that we've made. First, in terms of collaboration with internal and external actors, we've been very fortunate to count on both the internal and external entities who are enthused about this project, who are very collaborative, and that have provided us with a tremendous amount of input. We've consulted with our advisory boards. We've consulted with external employers in the public and private sector. We've consulted with other institutions and experts in the field. So in terms of the requirements within the grant for internal and external collaboration and consultation, I'm very optimistic not only about what we have achieved, but what we'll be able to achieve moving forward. The PLS process has been fully implemented. It was a fairly rigorous process. We consulted with other programs within the institution that have PLA programs developed. We also consulted with external entities that professionally review student credentials, such as ACE, CALE, etc., entities that I'm sure that you're all familiar with. All of our CBE courses were developed and implemented on time. So during the first year, everything was coming up roses. We were adhering to the program. It was going beyond our most optimistic expectations. Dr. Rannis has done a fabulous job of guiding us through all the shoals that are inherent in this kind of a process. We're very happy. PLA was in place. CBE courses were all developed. We had our program evaluation and all of the other elements there. We're happy about things moving forward. But COVID-19 hit, and there were a number of changes that needed to be made. First, the apprenticeship model was replaced with a work-paced model, at least until COVID-19 restrictions are lifted. So one of the components, as we've discussed here, is the apprenticeship model. External employers would provide our students with apprenticeship opportunities. During the first year, we reached out to potential employers, public, private sector. We went through our advisory boards, went through a number of different established organizations to do so. The response was enthusiastic. We were optimistic. COVID-19 hits. All of a sudden, I find myself in March and April reaching out to these same employers to see if they are interested, and receiving not only responses, but proactive emails from those employers that, well, Dr. Peak, we're not quite sure. We're laying off workers. There's a certain degree of uncertainty in the future. I don't know how we're going to be able to offer these apprenticeship opportunities, much less apprenticeship opportunities that have a compensated component to them. So we sat down with our advisory boards. We took an extended period of time to deliberate, and we requested a modification so that until the COVID-19 restrictions are lifted, we would switch over to a work-based model rather than the apprenticeship model. Once again, that's only until these restrictions are lifted, and we're hoping that approximately fall semester we'll be able to move forward once again with the apprenticeship component. The compensation for apprenticeships was also eliminated. I didn't want to accept this, but the straw that broke the camel's back was the last advisory meeting where some of our external employers basically said, Dr. Peak, you need to get this through your thick skull. Once again, we are going to be interested in providing opportunities once these restrictions are lifted, but it might not be for a while before they can be compensated. Third, unexpended travel funds. This was an interesting category. I spoke with Tricia the other day about this. She's dealing with a similar issue. Travel funds. So one part of this project was for us to schedule 4 regional conferences or symposiums in each part of the state. We're excited about that. We were going to go to each part of the state and we were going to promote this program. We were going to talk to colleges and universities that were interested in learning more about this program and maybe adopting this program. That was our intention. 4 regional symposiums. It's going to be wonderful. Boom. Once again, COVID-19. Nobody's traveling. Nobody's leaving. You're staying at home. And maybe even when you're staying at home, you better make sure that you have 3 or 4 masks on. All very much understandable. But our concern is, okay, how do we go about disseminating information about this new model that we've created with funding from the Perkins grant? And this is interesting. So we ended up replacing the 4 in-person conferences, and I'll make this quick because I'm probably running out of time, but this is the part where there's really a silver lining. We replaced the 4 in-person conferences with 2 virtual conferences. I was a little hesitant. There's a bit of trepidation. How successful is this going to be? Our first virtual conference was tremendously successful. Now, with the 4 conferences, we needed 4 conferences to reach everybody in the state, but with a virtual conference, we can reach everybody in the state, the country, and the world if we want to. In fact, with that first virtual conference, we were limiting advertisement of that conference geographically to the state of Texas, but for whatever reason, word got out, and other colleges and universities in other states heard about it. So because it was a virtual conference, we weren't really limited in terms of the people who could have access to this information. And in that conference, we ended up with 26 colleges and universities in the state of Texas attended that symposium rather than conference, to learn about this model. Many of them have expressed interest in it, but we also had 19 states that were represented in 5 countries, and I'm not even quite sure how word got out to them. I think if I remember quickly, India was there, China, it was just fascinating. So we're happy about the virtual format. We're going to have another one coming up here soon. And so that really is the silver lining with the COVID-19. COVID-19 has been devastating. I'm not going to say otherwise. The IT programs that this model was created specifically for, we've lost 25% of our students in those programs. In all of our IT programs this year alone, enrollment's down 25% in those programs, and it's roughly commensurate to what's occurring in the rest of the institution. Several members of professoriate in that particular information technology department have been forced to take additional courses or take courses to fill their load in our computer information technology and related departments. So COVID's hitting us hard. I know I don't want to beat a dead horse because we all are dealing with it. Hit us hard. In terms of this program, it did require us to make some changes, but these are going to be short-term changes. In the long term, I know that we're going to have that apprenticeship model up and running. Our recruitment efforts are going to be successful, and I'm truly optimistic. We just need to get past this little hump. Otherwise, though, have a report on track with everything. It's going well. Thank you so much once again for taking the time to listen to this presentation.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Really appreciate what you have to say here. Mindy, have you seen any questions in the Q&A? I see some in the chat. Do you want to take over with those?
Sherry is monitoring questions. I'll give the floor to Sherry, and I do have a question when others have been answered.
Terrific. We really only have one question, and it is from Dr. Peak. So Kevin, please feel free to elaborate. I'm just going to read what you wrote. The question is posed to our TSTC colleagues, and it is this: do you include apprenticeship opportunities in your program model? And if so, how have they been impacted by COVID-19?
Right. So currently, especially with our dual enrollment students, which is the grant, right? We do not have any apprenticeships that we are offering with our dual enrollment students. And At the program level, you know, outside of that, really we handle things more of an internship, right? We don't do full-on apprenticeships per se. So we have almost every program has an internship opportunity for the students and collaborates with industry in that manner. But sorry, I didn't see the little prompt for the video, but that is the impact that we have right now. So no formal apprenticeships. Probably the closest I would say we have are clinicals in our nursing program.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Sherry, do you see any other questions? I have a
Not
couple.
at this point. I'll continue monitoring as we talk.
Okay. Well, I have a question again for Gina and Karen, and it goes back to where you talked about everything is 100% online. As we moved into COVID, we looked at everything going online, but we also provided both synchronous and asynchronous online learning. Is all of yours asynchronous, or did you consider any synchronous presentations?
So as we transitioned because of COVID, we were doing a lot of synchronous. There were regular meetings being scheduled that were being recorded and were optional for the students. But that's not competency-based education. That's our existing model. Now, because our competency-based education model is going to be self-directed, it will be primarily asynchronous because the students need to be able to move through at their own pace, right? Sure. So some of the things that we have in place that are going to be happening though include a monitored chat throughout the day with faculty assigned. Think of it as an open door where you can go in and ask a cybersecurity faculty member a question anytime, right? So not just office hours, but this is a person almost like an open lab, right? Go in, ask your question, whatever the question may be, get that answered. So even though there may not be live synchronous training going on, students will still have access to our faculty on demand. And we also are providing our students with program enrollment coaches. And those will be available online, as well as for our face-to-face programs that will actually be embedded within the programs. They'll help with registration and advising and all of that, but they're there to make sure the students are making satisfactory progress. They are partners with our faculty members. They are going to be mentoring. They'll have access to the LMS to be able to make sure, hey, I see you haven't logged in a while, what's going on? So that partnership is something we are really excited about as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Excuse me. For Shannon and Bethany, I have another question. You noted that in your hospitals and some of your faculty may actually be hired by the hospital. And so my question is, do you have partnerships with the hospitals through which they actually continue to pay those individuals? Is it part of their job, so to speak, to work with you all and provide that class, whatever they do as the instructor of a class for your either LVN or ADN programs at the hospital, or are they your actual adjuncts and the colleges pay for them, even though they happen to be employees of the hospital?
Okay, so the hospitals have taken on the complete financial responsibility for the nursing faculty. So when they are during our courses, Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, as long as we're teaching class, those faculty are assigned, their hours are through the college. But it is in the partnership, that is the financial responsibility of the hospitals. And then like over Christmas, Thanksgiving, then our faculty are taking on a role of like a PRN nurse for the floor. And so they're returning to the hospital and working during the vacation times so that they have that salary that's more comparable to a regular floor nurse rather than an instructor. It's kind of a joint effort between the hospitals. And each hospital has kind of retained the freedom to set that up as they see fit. We have a couple of hospitals that are paying that as an hourly pay. And so if the nurse wants to sign up to work PRN, then she gets that hourly pay for working. If she wants to take that time off, then that's just time that she isn't compensated for. Others are doing a contractual where they're offering just the 9-month contract, and then anything on top of that is in addition to the contract that they had. So it's really worked out independently. However, each hospital sees that it would work best for them. And it's just contracted with that individual instructor.
Okay, thank you, thank you. I haven't seen any other further questions, so if it's okay.
I have another one.
Okay.
So a demonstration that our TSTC colleagues did of some of the in-course instructional activity was very interesting to me, and to us at THECB. Question for all three institutions and representatives: have you been finding this ability to do virtual activities on the shelf, or is this stuff that you feel that you've had to build yourselves? Where are you getting these very important and timely tools for students?
I'll start if it's okay. We are primarily having to do a lot of building, and we are doing a lot of hiring of instructional designers right now. For the vision team alone, I mean, our team is going to be over 30 instructional designers to help us build out all of the curriculum, because again, highly interactive, engaging. Now we do research what is available out there first. For example, HVAC, there is an awesome piece of software that exists. It's called Interplane. It does VR with the Oculus and all of that. You can also do the simulations online. So if we can find a tool that meets our needs that exists, 100%, we want to use what is available. Work smarter, not harder, right? However, for a lot of what we are needing, we're finding we're having to create a lot of that for the technical programs, especially.
I think for nursing, most of ours, we did implement Swift River. There's Nurse Tim, he has a virtual hospital. And so we have purchased that for our students. When you have your facilities, our furthest two colleges are about 3.5 hours away. And if you know anything about the Texas Panhandle, 3.5 hours away, you could have a foot of snow and it could be 60 degrees and sunny. So in order to compensate for the changes in weather, and when one facility may need to have a snow closure, when one town needs to close, them to use that virtual hospital to get their clinical experience in for that specific day, where everybody else gets to go actually into their hospitals. So we have used one that was already developed. We've also used Texas Nurses Association, American Nurses Association. There's several different nursing associations that have free education simulations that can be used. And so we've implemented those to help meet some of the objectives of our classroom that are a little more interactive. And then we've done some that we've created. So we've kind of used a little bit of everything.
So to respond to the question and maybe include some additional challenges in areas that might not be necessarily within the context of the question, it's been a little bit of both. We've been using external resources, but I think as an institution, necessity has been the mother of innovation. As a result of the constraints inherent to COVID-19, we as an institution have been forced to do things that maybe we should have done a little bit earlier. For example, as I mentioned a few moments ago, one of the components of our project was the development of 4 regional symposiums, and those were going to be in person. well, once again, COVID-19 required us to prefer those symposiums virtually. Well, we didn't have the technology to do so. And so we reached out to digital providers, and I'm fairly frank, and it gets me in trouble, but I was shocked. I was shocked by the prices that they were charging. And I've been in this field now for, geez, more than 30 years, and I age myself. And I was somewhat surprised by the charge that they were going to charge us. Anyhow, fortunately, after receiving bids from a number of different external providers and communicating to our representative the sums of those particular bids, the institution decided to go out and procure the technology that it needed to be able to host digital symposiums. So what would have cost us literally $60,000 or more for 4 virtual symposiums, the price was radically dropped almost down to free because the college developed that technology. And what's even better about that is not only was that digital platform then used for this particular project, but it's been used for projects throughout the entire institution. As an example, I recently hosted a binational conference on economic growth and development between Mexico and the United States. It's a conference where we traditionally do it in person. And by doing it in person, we're limited to our audience, to just individuals who are within really a 30 or 40 mile radius of where we are. But it's a useful conference because it gets information out about how to promote economic growth and development at a very grassroots level. Because of this new platform that the college had adopted, we were able to conduct that binational symposium virtually. We were able to reach the entire country and into Mexico. It was amazing. We had some 40 or 50 different institutions involved throughout Mexico, throughout the United States. We tripled the number of people who attended it. It went very well. So getting back to the question about the technology and the different resources that we have at our disposition, did we have to develop them? Did we get them from outside? It's been a little bit of both. That's an example of where we were able to develop our own technology. There are some other examples of where we have had to reach outward. And in some areas, we're a little bit saturated. Our distance learning department, all of a sudden, because all of our online courses have to go through a rigorous and a very strict evaluation process in distance learning. All of a sudden, everybody in the institution is converting their courses over to virtual, online, distance, and all of those had to be approved by DL. And so DL is just saturated. That's creating some problem. That created some potential problems for this project as we've taken on some additional courses to develop, which I won't go into all those details right now, but it's been a little bit of both. But what I can say is I think the silver lining to this, it's forced us to be more innovative, and it's also given us some resources that are going to enable us to be more successful in the future.
I will add to that and say it definitely has, we have seen an increase in institutional wide organizationally resources. Like Kevin said, like Google Education and getting all of those across the board things. And that really does help quite a bit.
Jenna, by the way, you guys are doing a great job, and it's not the time or place, but I'm going to recruit you for the next symposium. You can run, but you can't hide.
We'll talk, Kevin. That'll be fun. I'd love to.
Okay, any other questions?
I do have a question, and not to pick on TSTC. You've been the subject of or object of several questions. I'm interested to know this. It's very relevant in secondary CTE across the state right now, particularly with the adoption of Perkins 5 and the new emphasis on secondary, post-secondary pathways. You're doing competency-based education, reaching down into the high schools for dual credit in cybersecurity. I'm curious to know how are or will you be adapting dual credit courses to CBE and incorporating the TEKS as you're doing that. And two other parts to that question are, will CBE courses be articulated to existing TEKS and innovative courses for smooth secondary, post-secondary transition? And are there barriers to doing that if that is your end?
So one of the additional components of having to do when you have courses like in cyber that have the TEKs that need to be mapped, once we complete that deconstruction is doing that analysis and that crosswalking to make sure that and we also do the TSSB and all of that stuff with cybersecurity as well. All of that is outlined in the deconstruction document, and we map WCAM outcomes and all of the TSSB. All of that stuff gets mapped individually to our competencies and learning objectives. So that's a final gap analysis that occurs to make sure that even though we're building these classes and we're building them to match industry and everything else, they still have to meet the guidelines that are put in place for us to be able to do that. And so that is built into that process.
Okay, okay. And so are you, for existing secondary cyber courses, are you finding that you can smoothly articulate dual credit to those courses?
Now, we don't have any competency-based programs running currently. We're not launching CBE until this fall. So none of that is in place right now. We are still in development. So we have not implemented that at this time.
Okay, so you really haven't examined whether that's feasible, whether you're going to run into barriers doing that yet.
Correct. But don't think I'm not taking notes to make sure that we don't address it. And we have been working very closely with Norma Colunga Hernandez in ensuring that everything we're doing, eliminating those types of roadblocks. We're also working with our dual enrollment office very closely, all of the offices, right? Financial aid, veteran services, dual enrollment. Everybody has to be included in this process. And we've met multiple times with our dual enrollment partners and our dual enrollment staff to make sure that everything that is being done aligns with what is needed on that side.
Sure, great, great. Okay.
Just want to say on the
that.
roll, as the role of my timekeeper, we're at the 5-minute mark.
Mindy, can I make a quick comment?
Yes, I yield the floor to you, Kevin.
It'll be very brief given time. With reference to the last inquiry, at South Texas College, we have 4 fully operational CBE programs that enroll dual credit students, high school students, and we've been addressing a number of those issues over the last 3 years. So if the individual with the question would like any additional information, please feel free to contact me. At I think that my contact information is here. If not, it's just KMPEEK. That's KMPEEK at southtexascollege.edu. I think we can address some of those questions. Also, we've just recently published a handbook on CBE that also addresses those. Thank you very much.
Okay, and Gina, I will tell you that if we can assist by putting you in touch for consultation with TEA's cyber program staff, I'd be happy to do that if you want to reach out.
Right. And I don't, just because I myself am not aware of where Norma is in that process doesn't mean that hasn't happened, but I will definitely confer with her.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, I will begin transitioning us to what I'm sure is a very welcome break. Before I do, I want to thank all panelists for panel 2, TSTC, Amarillo, and South Texas College, good thought-provoking presentations. We will adjourn until 12:05. We'll take a little break. Stephanie will monitor our Zoom room during the break. When we convene, we'll go into panel 3, and from there we will wrap up our day. Thank you, folks. We'll see you at 12:05.
Hi, everyone. I just want to let you know that we got a couple minutes remaining on this break. Hope everyone has been able to grab something to drink and stretch your legs. And we will resume here in a couple of minutes.
And it is 12:05. Stephanie, you can see our panelists' presence better than I. Are we all back on board and ready to go?
It does look as if everyone is here, so we can go ahead and move forward.
All right, then. I will introduce our third panel on promoting curricular innovation. It's such a good topic to have a day devoted to. Our moderator for panel 3 will be Gina Jean, performance-based education program manager at Texas State Technical College. And of course, you just heard from Gina in the last round of presentations. Tina, I will turn it over to you, and you may introduce panelists as each group gets started.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And good afternoon, everybody. So our first panelist is going to be Jerry Parks and Project Lead the Way. And they have partnered with Dr. Sarah James and San Jacinto College in Leading the Way, a project focused on increasing access and the advancement of career and technical students across the state of Texas. So this work has been done through the creation and implementation of workshops recognized by the CB and TWC in order to provide a seamless transition from the completion of a Department of Labor registered apprenticeship to a community college. In 2019 and in 2020, SanJac was awarded additional funding to work with Project Lead the Way, as well as summer workshops on career opportunities. Our two presenters today, I believe Jerry Parks is the project coordinator for the Pathways to Careers and Leading the Way grants. She joined San Jacinto College in 2019 and has over 15 years of experience in education, training, and project management. Partnering with Jerry on the project is Dr. Sarah James. Dr. James is the Associate Vice Chancellor of Continuing and Professional Development, CPD, at San Jacinto College. In this position, she provides oversight of the Division of Corporate Training and the Division of Community Education for the college district. Prior to becoming Associate Vice Chancellor, she served as Dean of Instruction and Academic Dean at San Jacinto College North Campus. She has over 25 years of experience at the community college level and 18 years in public education. Under her leadership, Sam Jack has established the first maritime program in a community college in Texas. Dr. James is the lead contact for apprenticeships for San Jacinto College, and she also serves as a facilitator for the Houston Area Apprenticeship Advisory Committee, a committee established to increase knowledge of and participation in apprenticeships. She is the principal investigator of a recently awarded $12 million grant from the Department of Labor for apprenticeships in IT in collaboration with Austin Community College, Dallas Community College District, and Alamo colleges. So please join me in welcoming Jury and Dr. James as they tell us more about leading the way.
Hi, so I am back again, excited to talk to you about the Leading the Way grant. I really did feel like maybe I needed to do a change of clothes like the Oscars since it's my second presentation, but no, I was too busy listening to everyone else to get that accomplished. So what is the Leading the Way grant? The Leading the Way grant is a partnership between Project Lead the Way and San Jacinto College that really aims to meet the needs of career and technical students across the state of Texas through increased access and advancement. Go ahead and move to the next slide. So our primary partner with this grant is Project Lead the Way. They are helping us achieve the goals of this grant. And I just wanted to spend a little time talking about them. Please move to the next slide. So Project Lead the Way has been around for quite some time. They're a wonderful organization. They are a nonprofit out of Indianapolis. They've been around for more than 20 years, and they create curriculum specifically for STEM areas in the pathways of computer science, engineering, and biomedical science. They are a believer that STEM education should be hands-on education, and that is the curriculum that they create. They have a huge footprint in the state of Texas. Actually, they reach students in over 300 high schools in Texas. They also have elementary school and intermediate school curriculum. This particular grant focuses on high school courses only. And that number continues to grow. Even now in this crazy time when we thought we would probably see some drop off for them, that has not been the case. Their number of schools that are coming on and adding in more curriculum just continues to grow. So it's been an excellent partner. I will say that back in March when everything, our whole world flipped to virtual, they did an amazing job working with their teachers and schools to switch all of their curriculum online, which of course is really complicated when you want to do things hands-on. But they did an amazing job, not only with their high school and elementary and middle school curriculum, but also with their teacher training, which they did solely online last summer and was so successful that they will continue to do it online next summer, or this coming summer, even if that isn't necessary to do. The teachers really gave them rave reviews for what they had done. So they have just been an excellent partner for us. If you want to go ahead and advance. Okay, so I want to talk about what our two main goals were for this grant. The first one is increasing access to Project Lead the Way curricula. And there are some quantifiers for this first goal. One is it was only the high school engineering curricula. That is what we really wanted to increase students to have the opportunity to receive that curricula, particularly students who are underserved and don't normally have access to this type of hands-on curriculum. It was also very specifically for Gulf Coast schools that were affected by Harvey. So it's really that region along the coast that was so affected by Harvey. And we know we wanted to really reach out to them and help them continue to offer such a wonderful resource to their students. So originally we wanted to make sure that we brought on 20 new instructors who would receive this really intensive training. It's an amazing process to go through to help these teachers teach this curriculum, not only just to teach this curriculum, but to learn additional ways and methodologies and techniques of teaching hands-on, so that they can actually take that and use those kinds of techniques in all of their classes. So that teacher training is it's a 2-week intensive training, and the grant covers the cost for that, for those teachers. We wanted to support at least 10 classrooms, and by support, that means purchasing supplies. There are specific supplies that go with the classroom. There's also a participation fee that we covered through Project Lead the Way that then allows them to access online materials as well. And in working with Project Lead the Way, what we know is that the first year of offering a new course through them is the most expensive, because you buy the most things that are non-consumable that you're going to be using year after year after year. And so that can be a really big challenge for some schools to come up with the funding for that. So we helped there, as well as covering the participation fee for these schools. And our hope was that at the end of the grant, we would reach at least 200 students in these classrooms. So let's go to the next slide, and we can talk about the progress we've made. All in all, I have to say, with everything that has gone on, I am really, really excited about the progress that we have made with this grant. We added 19 new instructors. 5 of those instructors received their training in 2020, and another 14 will receive their training in 2021. At the time I created this presentation, we had 7 classrooms and 139 students. I actually did just get an update yesterday. One of our schools, the CTE director and the teacher have been out due to COVID for a number of months. So obviously COVID has created some really interesting and ongoing challenges for us. But that now is, we supported 8 classrooms in 2021. I'm sorry, from those initial 5 schools, we have supported 8 classrooms, and we have come up to 148 students who have now participated in these classrooms or in these courses. So from that initial goal of we're clearly going to go right over the top of 200 students in these 2 years. And the really exciting thing for me is that it's kind of a pebble in the stone, I'm sorry, a pebble in a pond kind of metaphor. We're going to put a little money in and see it really ripple out for years and years and years, where we can reach not just 200 students, but hundreds, if not thousands of students in this process. So that's a really exciting thing to be a part of. In 2021, like I said, we're going to add in an additional 9 schools and 14 instructors who will be attending training in 2021. We don't yet know how many more classrooms we will be supporting or how many more students will be participating. That will be decided, obviously, in the coming months. I will say one more thing about COVID here before we move on. It really created a challenge for us in this process in that everything slowed way down. As soon as I knew that we probably weren't coming back and we were going to continue to work remotely, I really wanted to make sure to give these schools as much flexibility as possible because we clearly were not their highest priority. And so that really kind of dragged things out a little bit for us. And I'm happy to say that with this next go around of 9 schools, things will move along much faster as we have better systems in place to make sure all the pieces line up and get completed. So if we go ahead and move to the next slide. So that was our first goal, and we have made great progress. Like I said, I'm really excited about that. The second goal, which is more of a statewide goal, which is to increase advancement by creating a crosswalk between Project Lead the Way curricula and Wickham course content. Originally, that first grant really just has to do with the engineering courses, but the crosswalk, we wanted to really engage in all of their pathways, the engineering, the biomedical, and computer science. So go ahead and advance to the next slide. And this is really where COVID reared its ugly head, and we had to kind of go back to the drawing board. I think Kevin was the one who mentioned that maybe some of what has come out of all this is good, and I would totally agree with that. We had to go back because originally we thought we would do these face-to-face. We would bring in people together for a couple of days, sit down, work through the process, which would be wonderful, of course. None of that happened. We had to move the whole thing virtually. And again, COVID just kind of slowed down that whole process. And so we did run into some challenges along the way. Thankfully, from my own perspective, online collaboration is something I'm really comfortable with. And so that piece of it was good. We were able to move online fairly quickly and accomplish those pieces with relative ease. Where the issue came is we were bringing together high school instructors and college faculty, and they really have different needs for flexibility and accommodation. And so that is really where our biggest struggle came from in this whole process. We had hoped to do the original crosswalk in the spring, which would have been great because then everyone's on contract and we don't really have to worry about that. But we got pushed back to the summer, and then that became a much bigger challenge. But we did slowly and surely chip away at it and make good progress. Next slide, please. So we were able to complete the engineering crosswalk in the fall of 2020. Really excited about that we were able to get it completed. We worked with community college faculty and Project Lead the Way master teachers throughout the state of Texas. Master teachers through Project Lead the Way are teachers who actually teach other teachers. So they're well versed on the courses that we were reviewing. We created pathways for students to receive credit for prior learning. And I'm going to talk more about this process in the next slide, but I want to make a note here that this is not course for course transfer. That's not what we were setting up. This is about block credits based on skills learned. What we discovered is that their engineering pathways most closely align with engineering design or drafting and engineering technology. Now, you might be looking at that list and thinking, well, it's engineering. Why didn't you just work with engineering courses within the community college? Well, one, that's not the point of the grant. The grant was to work with Wickham courses, not ACGM courses. There are a whole host of other issues trying to do a crosswalk between engineering courses and Project Lead the Way, their engineering curricula, that just would not have matched up very well for us, or that would not have been a workable process. So we focused just on WICM courses, which we believe is actually a really important pathway or crosswalk to create for those students who would like to get into the engineering field without being an engineer. So there's some really great matchups there that they can work with. Next slide, please. So this is a screenshot of the data that we collected. And I want to walk you through this process of how we set this up. But before I get to that, I do have to make one extra note in here, and that none of this would have been possible without our participants and specifically our facilitators. We had excellent facilitators who really were able to consolidate the information, the data that the participants gave us. We could not have done it without them. So what we did is we sat down with the Project Lead the Way individuals and their curriculum, and we took those classes basically and deconstructed them into skills and sub-skills. And that's what you see here on the left-hand side. And you'll notice there's no mention of what class that came from or what course that came from. And that is on purpose. We didn't want our participants to think about it as a course for course transfer. We wanted them to focus solely on the skills that the students learned. This was a pretty easy process because Project Lead the Way already has clearly define their courses and what the outcomes, objectives, and skills learned are. So that went relatively quickly for each of their courses. And then we took those courses, those skills, and we lumped them together in sections. We came up with about 4 sections that they kind of fell into, from anything from employability skills to drafting skills to engineering. So there were 4 main categories that we worked with. And then when we got together, the faculty, the community college faculty that participated helped add in the WICM courses that you see at the top of this spreadsheet. And then all the X's are where obviously those skills overlap. This one has a lot of overlap because it has to do with the drafting courses. After we were done, after we finished the main session the first week of September, we then sent that information to additional faculty members that wanted to participate but were not able to attend the session. And they added their input as well. That is one of the things that we really learned from our first go around that we will implement in additional crosswalk activities. So we did engineering first. This is part of the data that we collected. Our next step will be kind of a reverse engineering process so that we'll take it back to the Project Lead the Way course. And up there in the upper left-hand corner will be that Project Lead the Way course. So an example of that is Intro to Engineering Design. And then underneath of it, you'll see the skills and the sub-skills, and off to the right, you'll see where they line up with WICM courses. The reason we want to kind of reverse engineer it is so it creates easier access for the student. When they take their information to the school and want to possibly get courses for these, or I'm sorry, get credit for these courses, they'll be able to say, oh, I took Intro to Engineering Design, and the institution will be able to look up that information and see what skills overlap and decide whether or not they are going to give credit for that information. As I said before, this is not a course by course transfer. So one of the things that we have been very clear on with the participants as we went through this process is that whether or not the schools or the institutions give credit for these courses is entirely up to them based upon their own policies and procedures. Our goal is to create a foundation for them to move on to further partnerships with their particular community college and the Project Lead the Way high school in their area. It's just a foundation for them to work with. So we can go to the next slide. So what's next? So like I said, we learned a lot from that first crosswalk. We will be doing additional crosswalks this spring in the biomedical and computer science areas. We know one of the things, like I said, that we really learned was that high school teachers and community college faculty have different needs when it comes to accommodation. So we're going to work closely with them to find dates that work for the small groups. Rather than trying to bring everyone together for a large group, we're going to break it down into smaller groups so that we can find dates and times that work for them. And then those individuals who might not be able to be in those sessions will have an opportunity still to give us feedback and input into that final data. And then we'll take, once we have all that data, we will go back and compile it all. And like I said, kind of do a little reverse engineering to so that students can come to the institution and say, these are the Project Lead the Way courses that I took. Do you offer, can I get college credit for those? Then in the late spring and early summer, we will be hosting some virtual crosswalk presentations for anyone throughout the state of Texas who would like more information on this. Specifically, we're going to be targeting those high schools that participate in Project Lead the Way engineering courses. And that's, like I said, 300 high schools across the state of Texas to let them know that this opportunity exists for their students and help to kind of create some partnerships between community colleges and high schools. Then additionally, in the summer of 2021, we'll do the second round of teacher training. And again, that will be virtual. They will attend the training in the summer and then start teaching those classes in the fall of 2021. So that's the end of my presentation. Dr. James, I don't know if there's anything you want to add. If not, I'll turn it back over to Gina.
Nope, that's fine.
Thank you so much, Jerry. So I'm going to admit, I did not know a lot about Project Lead the Way prior, and it's so exciting to see how large it is in the state of Texas.
It really is. When we first got started, I didn't know anything about them either. It gets back to my child again. My son has taken a couple of their courses, but they really have a significant footprint here in the state of Texas.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you. So on to our next presentation. Dr. Keeling Olson of Temple College and Dr. O'Brien are working on the Weckham renovation, restructuring, repairing, and rebuilding our Weckham Foundation project. And their focus is to assist in updating Weckham by working with the Weckham Advisory Committee, the prior Weckham leadership team members, Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board staff, and the CTE-CE instructional specialists. And I think we can all relate to how important this project is. So our two presenters today are Dr. Leslie Keeling Olson and Dr. Catherine O'Brien. Dr. Leslie Keeling Olson is the director of Perkins grants and a professor of criminal justice at Temple College. She has been with Temple College for 19 years and has been working on Perkins for 15 of those. Leslie has watched as many of the Perkins professions that taught her about Perkins started retiring, and she started writing Perkins grants in an attempt to capture some of that knowledge. She likes to help her Perkins colleagues, and specific to this grant, working with Dr. Catherine O'Brien in the CB and the WECM Advisory Board in renovating WECM. And Dr. Catherine O'Brien was the Associate Vice Chancellor for Learning and Assessment at San Jacinto College, where she oversaw curriculum development, assessment, program review, research, and institutional effectiveness in education technology. She has been in education for 38 years and began her career as a biology professor for 20 years before moving to administration as the Dean of Allied Health, Institutional Effectiveness, and Program Development at San Jac South. Since retiring in 2017, she has resumed teaching biology at UHCL and Alvin Community College and has helped Alvin develop 2 technical programs and an AS in engineering, while also working on several Perkins leadership grants for Temple College. So thank y'all so much for joining us today. I will turn it over to you.
Morning or afternoon. We've already passed morning. I am just going to give a brief rundown and then pass the baton to my wonderful colleague on this project. I get a lot of Perkins leadership ideas kind of just on a whim. And this was one of those where I was in a meeting and I thought, you know, it might be time for a Perkins leadership grant so that we can kind of just renovate. And Catherine's going to give you plenty of history, but I remember a time period where we had cyclical reviews and the instructional experts went and met in Midland for a while, and we did all of our updates, and then we went to triggers. And so a lot of people don't remember that. And so we've also lost a lot of knowledge base when it does come to how WICM works. So I could never have done this grant without the expertise and without the guidance of Dr. Catherine O'Brien. So I'm very, very thankful that she comes on board and helps me numerous times. This is probably our 3rd, if not 4th year where I've reached out to her and said, hey, I have an idea. And when I say I have an idea, she just goes with it. So I graciously turn this over, and I know that she can field it and I will be available, but Catherine, it's all yours.
Thank you, Leslie. Good afternoon, everyone. Leslie's idea for this one was that we needed to restructure, repair, and rebuild kind of our WECM foundation. So for today's presentation, we're going to talk about the purpose of this grant, past, present, and future of WECM as we're kind of envisioning this, the goals of the grant, what we've accomplished so far, and what activities and strategies still remain. Next slide, please. The purpose of the grant is to work with, to collaborate with, as Gina said, the WECM Advisory Committee, some of the folks who are still in the field who worked on the WECM leadership team, Mindy and Dwayne at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, and to reach out to CTE instructional specialists and former facilitators to assist us in updating WECM. This is a 2-year grant, and I've just mentioned who all the participants are there, and so we'll move to our next slide. So historically, WECM was developed under Perkins leadership grants as far back as 1995. And then the database that everyone knows as the WECM manual was developed between 95 and 1998. It was a 3-year process. And that was right at the beginning of my introduction into curriculum when I was at San Jac. So from its inception, WECM has been the product of work by community college faculty and administrators. In 2002, Midland assumed responsibility for WECM maintenance. And again, using WECM funds, set up a process for chronologically, if you will, reviewing all the programs that existed in WECM. And this process involved gathering instructional specialists, facilitators, lead facilitators, all in one location, hiring data specialists, and then housing and feeding everyone while reviewing multiple programs. And the WECM process, there was work throughout the year, but the meeting of the minds usually occurred between May and early July, so that the courses could be updated, put into the WECM manual by the end of August or the start of the fall semester, so that then institutions could revise their curriculum, their college catalogs, their databases internally during the next year. Originally, this was a 3-year cycle of reviewing all of the courses. And towards the end of all of that, around 2016, we realized that so many new programs had been added on that we really needed to move to more of a 4-year cycle. And that was recommended. 2016 and 2017 became a transition year of shifting to the triggers as a means of reviewing the programs. And this grant is really about designing a process where we will merge the triggers along with the chronological review. We're looking to design a process that is going to continue to be field driven and Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board administered. Next slide, please. The goals of the grant are an assessment and an evaluation of priority instructional areas that need WECM updates. And by this, I mean, there are some technical programs out there that wherein the courses within those programs have not been reviewed in about 7 years. And so what we need to do is to prioritize which programs need to be reviewed sooner rather than later. We're looking at revising a 4-year schedule. And let's see what else we have. The workshops are going to use technology instead of the travel to a single location and carry out WECM revisions. What we have found with the whole COVID thing, I'm teaching online, anatomy and physiology classes. We're having a Zoom meeting today online. And we've been doing the WECM advisory committees and steering committees meetings online. So what we're looking to do is to utilize that type of technology in order to bring our instructional specialists back together and review the courses. What we also need to do is train institutional administrators who would like to assist in conducting the workshop. The old term that we used to use for those folks was facilitators. And some of our facilitators have retired, and we have had new people come into CTE since we stopped doing the chronological workshops. And so the workshops then will need some facilitators, and professional development and the training of those facilitators will be part of this grant as well. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, accomplishments. We've performed a data analysis of the WECM courses to determine which ones need to be prioritized in instructional areas. More about that one in just a minute. We've analyzed the status in terms of who exists out there as WECM facilitators. And again, we've been meeting with the WECM Advisory Committee and co-board staff, as well as other WECM stakeholders on WECM facilitator training. So what we needed to do was we needed to know how many individuals existed in the field who were already trained as facilitators, how many were still active in higher education and were willing to continue as administrators, and again, to identify new administrators who would be interested in serving as facilitators. To accomplish this, we sent out a survey, and we sent it to members of the WECM Advisory Committee, to Perkins Basic Grant Directors, to Perkins Leadership Grant Directors. And from their feedback, we have developed a list of people that we know are interested in serving as facilitators and receiving that facilitator training. If there are some participants out there listening to us today that have not heard that there is a need for facilitators, my email and Leslie's email are going to come up on the last slide. So if you will send us an email, we'll be happy to put you on the list. We've already begun also to work out some of the details for this training. We've been fortunate in that some of the PowerPoints that were used for the previous training are still out there and available. Obviously, these are going to be modified as we move to a new way of conducting the workshops, but it was nice to know that we still had folks that had stuff tucked away in their computers. We will be looking at first, before we can really establish the facilitators, answering the question of how many do we need? And to do this, one of the things that we are doing is that we're going to look at, if you remember the term career clusters, we're going to look at the career clusters. If you will move to the next slide, please. We're going to be meeting, coordinating, collaborating with the WECM Advisory Committee, the co-board, the WECM stakeholders to establish this review cycle. And again, we're going to do it based on the clusters. And one of the things that we have done is we've established a subcommittee for the WECM Advisory Committee that is a steering committee. And we would have met last week if it were not for what I'm calling Snowmageddon here in the Houston area. We're going to meet instead tomorrow and start this process. And what we're going to do is we have taken data that Dwayne has provided us that shows which programs are at which colleges. And also, we already knew kind of which programs fit in under which clusters. So we're going to look at the clusters, how many programs are there, how many colleges are offering these programs. And if you'll move to the last slide, please. As I just said, we're going to have a meeting tomorrow. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask that WECM Steering Committee to help verify that we have the right programs in the right areas. If you look, for example, at a rubric like fashion, FSHN, you're going to find that that rubric is actually under 4 clusters. It's in manufacturing. It is in kind of the art area. It is also in the marketing area. Well, it doesn't make sense to bring people who look at those rubrics together 3 different times. So what we're looking to do is to maybe have to do some rearranging to move from the rubrics to the program to the clusters so that we can regroup and make this a little more logical, if you will. We're going to develop a series of webinars and opportunities. And some of these will begin with our first TACTI session that is coming up, also a Zoom meeting, I think, in April. And we'll provide an overview and understanding, background knowledge of WECM to new CE and CTE professionals in higher education. As one of the members of our advisory board keeps pointing out, we lost something when we quit having these WECM workshops. And what we lost is the professional development that was ongoing for people who work in the WECM area. And so we're going to try and reestablish some of that by providing seminars through this grant. I've already mentioned to you that we're in the process of establishing WECM updates through the next 2 years in conjunction with the triggers. There's really nothing wrong with the triggers, and some of that information that's coming in through the triggers, the problem is it's not quite going anywhere. We're not getting the movement from triggers that might come in through the comment section to creating a real workshop to take care of whatever it was that was recommended. And so that's what we're looking to do, is kind of merge the triggers with a chronological workshop. As we are looking at these, we'll go back and also look, these were called models for how we conducted the workshop within the WECM protocols. Some were model 1, some were model 2s. There were actually at one time 5 different models. A model 1 was like a full-blown workshop where you invited colleges to send instructional specialists in to take a look at the courses. Model 2s were when you had a program, but it was maybe only at 2 or 3 different colleges. And so instead of, again, doing the big workshop where you brought people together, those were actually done online or by telephone or email years ago in order to upgrade or revise and update courses that way. So we're going to be employing, again, as I've mentioned, some of that terminology. We're going to establish what I anticipate will be a 4-year cycle. We're going to then set up and start following that cycle for holding the WECM meetings. And then we're going to host the facilitator trainings. We'll start some during the upcoming TACTI meeting, but as we roll out what we anticipate will be the programs that need to be reviewed in 2021 and 2022, we will be doing facilitator trainings just in front of those workshops as well, okay? And that's really what I have to report to you today about this grant. I thank Leslie for the opportunity to work on it. It's fun to get out and to visually at least see everyone and work with you again. And this is really important work for the workforce education in the state of Texas. So thank you.
Catherine, can I add one quick thing?
Sure.
The TACTI conference is virtual this year, and the kickoff to the conference includes 3 sessions. One of the sessions is WICM 101. Additionally, there is a Perkins session, so it will include Brunstein, it will include the coordinating board, and it will include Octay. Specifically from the coordinating board, Mindy will be joining us. So I realize there might be a conflict there, but then also later in the conference, we will be doing another WICM session. So I'm really excited to have WICM 101 because I suspect y'all are like me. There's a lot of new CTE faculty, and when you say WICM, they're not really sure what it is. And so it will be nice to kind of get them up to speed and get them into the groove of how to use it and what it is.
Thank you. And can we have that last slide so that everybody can get our emailing address? Oh, it's not on there.
Yeah, we'll give all of the
We'll send
contact
it out.
information here in just a
Okay,
minute.
thank you.
And I'm going to jump in here. We have 4 short minutes for Q&A and discussion. Sherry, do we have any questions from
No, we do not.
any quarter? Okay.
Nothing on the chat or the Q&A.
Okay. From panelists, do we have any questions on these 2 presentations? I think you have just blown us away. Everybody.
Thank you so much for those great presentations. Maybe real quick for one quick questions, and this can be for both of y'all. What would you say has been the most challenging aspect of the projects?
Well, I'll jump in first. The most challenging, as I mentioned in my well, two things really in my presentation. One is that working with high school and college faculty, they have totally different work lives, right? When they are available to do things is just totally different. And so that's been a real challenge. The second one is really the pace of everything once COVID hit. There were little things that needed to be accomplished that should have taken weeks, turned into months. It just really drug out the process for some things. But as I mentioned to someone the other day, it felt like for the first, 18 months, I was pushing a boulder up a hill with this grant. And now for the last 6, I'm trying to get out of the way of the boulder on the way back down. So things have really sped up, and I think we're past some of those early challenges. But Catherine, go ahead.
I have to say the cohort staff has been phenomenal in terms of providing me with the data that I need to work on. Being kind of quarantined here at the house, I have had plenty of time to look at the data, but there is a lot of it. I mean, for example, within manufacturing alone, cluster 13, there are 26 technical programs. And I haven't even tackled allied health yet. I've identified 15 separate programs within IT. So, it's just a matter of how are we going to manage all of this. The decision was made quite some time ago to move away from utilizing Perkins funds to bring people together to do this project. We were up to about $800,000 a year, I think, on funding for this. And so we're trying to find a new way to do it, but not lose some of what we have. And again, bringing new people. I'm looking forward to meeting some of the new young people that have joined us in technical education and helping to train them. So thank y'all for the opportunity.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Both of them are very exciting projects. Thank you for sharing with us today.
Okay, and thank you, Gina. Thanks to our colleagues too at San Jacinto College and at Temple. You've been active participants today. All three groups of you, including Gina, I do appreciate it. I want to pass along a comment that is in questions and answers. It's a comment. This is from Robin Garrett, who chairs the WECM Advisory Committee. She says, thank you, Catherine and Leslie. So please know your work is appreciated. I see a question.
It's a comment.
Please.
Do you want to read it, Mindy? Go right ahead.
Okay, sure. We have a comment. Some CTE programs are subject to regulatory changes by accrediting agencies.
Yes.
I suggest the grant, this would be the WECM grant, presumably, address and revisit methods to do off-cycle reviews.
That is one of the triggers, actually. If you can look, if you go to the WECM site, where you're going to look at what the courses are, across the top there is something called WECM protocols, the protocol manual. And if you will look in there, you will find a list of what the triggers are. And accreditation changes, real estate, nursing, pick a topic. And that is one of the triggers. But through the WECM comments, and that little tab is also at the top of that page too, the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board and the WECM Advisory Committee need to hear from the field that it is time to hold a workshop. And that's part of the training that's going to be taking place this spring, is the communication that is incumbent upon the field to let the coordinating board and the WECM Advisory Committee know changes need to be made. So we're going to get this fixed.
All right, thank you very much for that. If there are no quick questions remaining from any quarter, I will proceed to wrap up and adjourn this day's meeting. I thank everyone, and I want to name colleges: Dallas College, San Jacinto College presenting twice. TSTC, Amarillo College, South Texas College, Temple College. We have innovation going on all around this state through Perkins State Leadership Grants. It is with some humbleness that I hear from you all about your innovative work and work that's going to have ramifications going forward with what you create and give to the field. You have my appreciation. I'm looking forward very much to our presentations tomorrow that will include a panel on enhancing employability and on access and student supports. And so this will kind of be a very full and well-balanced group of leadership presentations for this annual event. I thank you all. I thank Stephanie, Sherry, and Dwayne. I would like to see you all please go forward and have a lovely day, okay? And we'll see you all tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock when we reconvene. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.